I haven't received any apologies and no declarations of interest. Do we move the submissions on block first, or do we do that after we've heard them?
Receive the community board submissions.
Yeah. Okay, so I'd like to move that we receive the long-term plan 2018-2028 community board submissions. Do I have a seconder for that? Andrew? I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Those opposed say no. That's carried. Thank you. Each of the community boards has 20 minutes, and how you choose to use that is entirely over to you. But I would advise you to leave a little bit of time so that councillors can explore with you some of the issues that you want to raise. All of your submissions have been read by councillors, and so it's really important that when you come to the table that you really touch on the issues that are important to your community. So could I invite Sam McDonald and I don't know the others. I don't know if you're bringing your deputy up to the table as well, Aaron Campbell. If you come to the table and welcome in your new role as the chair of Fendalton Waimaere Herwood Community Board.
Well, thank you, Leanne, and good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for the opportunity to present our long-term plan submission. That's up. Look, before I begin, can I just acknowledge David Cartwright for his work on the submission. His name's on the document, and he led the team that put together what I think is quite an articulate and well thought out submission to you today. Can also acknowledge Aaron as our Deputy Chair. He's also spent a lot of time working on this. But what we thought we'd do today is provide, before we go into the detail of the projects, a bit of a context about our wards. And it's always important, I think, to remind you of the demographics we have over in our part of town, and I think that really plays a role in the projects we're advocating for. So I'll do that, talk about how we engaged, and then at a high level talk about some of the projects we're looking at, and then Aaron is very keen to talk more about some of the projects, and as Leanne said, we'll certainly leave time for questions. It's a Fendalton Waimaere Herwood tradition that we're concise and to the point, so we'll leave plenty of time for you to come back to us. So if we just start with those community board demographics, I think it's really important to note the ageing population, particularly in our Fendalton area and sort of those larger homes. I also like to point out to any community group, and indeed you guys today, that we have a large number of Housing New Zealand properties in our ward. Ironically, they're actually predominantly in the Fendalton ward, in the back of Brindwa. And then I guess the other side of that is our deprivation index. So we have a really broad spectrum, ranging from a 1 in the Homewood area right through to a 9 in Jelly Park. So I guess what we're trying to do is just paint a picture that there's a really diverse population in our area who will contribute to our community. What I wanted to do is just take you through, just really quickly, our wards. So if we look at Fendalton first, the median personal income you'll see up there is $35,700. The average house price is $855,000, and that annual rates contribution is $41 million. I was looking through the LTP last night actually, and based on that average house price, the rate increase will be 5.72% based on that at the moment. If we look at my ward, the Waimaere ward, the median personal income is in line generally with the city at $29,400. The average house price is $608,000, and our annual rates contribution to the city coffers is nearly $27.5 million. Based on that, we would get a 5.6% rate increase based on the current LTP. And then the Herwood ward, Aaron Kewen's ward, we've got a median personal income of $32,000, an average house price of nearly $730,000, and their annual rates contribution is nearly $33 million. Based on that, we would get a 5.67% rate increase on that average price. I think this is quite an interesting graph if you've got a chance to have a look up at the screen, and it breaks down the proposed capital expenditure versus the rate take in those wards. And obviously that's just capital, that's not OPEX, but I think it really signifies that we practice what we preach. We don't ask for a lot, but we do contribute significantly to the city. Obviously you'll see Linwood, Central and Heathcote is substantially higher, and I think that's, everyone will understand that's predominantly due to the Central City rebuild. But look, I think if there's one thing to take away from this, that's certainly a really good stat for the day, for indeed the rest of the presentations. I thought I'd just touch on briefly how we engaged, and I'm sure that as you've all been working through your LTP engagement, you'll realise that it's a lot easier to go to the people than have the people come to you. We found that the Culture Galore was a really effective way, where we had over 15,000 people come through in a couple of hours. And indeed, you'll see the picture up here with Raf and the 2 errands outside Bishopdale Mall. And I think it's really important, and we certainly made it a priority, to be seen in our communities wanting to genuinely take their views on board. So I think, before I hand over to Aaron, I just wanted to touch on a couple of the key concerns from our engagement. The first one, and again, don't shoot the messenger, we're passing on the feedback from our communities, was the concern over the money spent on cycleways. From my point of view, there's been 3 things that have come out of this process. The rate increase we consider is quite high. The cycleways obviously is a concern that people are raising with us, and I think the water chlorination, which is obviously an issue you're all working through at the moment. So if we look, and I will pass over to Aaron to go into these in detail, but just at a really broad level, we want to focus on the regeneration of Bishopdale. We want to look at, we're obviously in full support of traffic lights at the Breens and Harewood and Gardeners Road intersection. We really want an emphasis on road maintenance and core infrastructure, and we'd like to see some toilet facilities at the lake, along with a deferment of the wheels to wing cycleways. And then obviously, as I pointed out at the beginning, with the rate increases across our wards based on that average house price, we're really keen to see that rate increase driven down, because it does disproportionately affect properties within our area. So look, I'll pass over to Aaron to go into a wee bit more detail, then we'll conclude, and then happy to take questions.
Of that slide, there's probably 2, just go backwards please, thank you. There's 2 things that I'd just like to highlight there. One is the Lake Roto and Lake Kohatu area there. It used to be the site of the former Waimaori Council landfill. It's a fantastic, there's 2 lakes there. They're both fantastic recreation lakes, one predominantly for the jet ski in Canterbury group, as well as the other lake has a huge variety of recreational uses, from dragon boaters, learn to sail, the list just goes on. In summer, it is open for public to access. In summer, this past summer, it's had a tremendous amount of demand brought on by public accessing it, wanting to swim there. There was 5 portable toilets. There 3 were supplied, paid for by the recreation groups, 2 are supplied by council. When you have 2, 3, 4,000 people there in a day, those quickly become overwhelmed. There's issues around just the management of that space, which I know that staff are working on, which we certainly appreciate. 12 months ago, I'm just looking for the words here. The issues that were at the lake were slightly different. They were regarding kind of security and that kind of thing. Now it's just the amount of use that it gets is tremendous. So in the LTP there are 2 toilet facilities on budget. One's in the north, one's to the south, of about 300,000 per unit. We would like to request that one of those facilities be brought forward in the LTP, so that that's installed a little bit sooner than what's currently there. And then that would go on to the regeneration of Bishopdale, particularly the Bishopdale Mall. There's currently a Plunkett Room site there that is earthquake damaged. It's beyond cost-effective repair, as well as the use of that facility. It's just not really suitable for much. So the proposal there is to use the money in the LTP from deferring one of the toilet facilities at one of the lakes there, and bringing that into the Bishopdale Mall. So it would be a public toilet facility that's available 24 hours a day. As you'll know, the Bishopdale Mall Library and Community Centre, Orau Whata, has just been built. The toilet facility there is only open, during, effectively library opening hours and things like that. So that's probably the one, or one of our major drivers for this. Thank you.
Fantastic. So look, just in conclusion, if I go right through to it. Sorry, I'm not the best PowerPoint mover, so you've probably missed a couple of these as we've gone through. But look, just to conclude, and I think our submission genuinely articulates the views of North West Christchurch. we're strong advocates for minimal rate increases, a real focus on core infrastructure and services. We'd like to see the annual general charge inflation proofed. That hasn't moved in a couple of years, so we'd like to see that. We generally aren't supportive of of our regional fuel tax, and we'd like to commend, I think, Leanne, Carleen, and you all for your continual drive for efficiency within the council. I think that is showing real dividends. The last point there is just greater delegations to boards, and we'd continue to encourage that. I know Leanne's very strong on it, and we'd genuinely like to see more being done at a board level. So, look, thank you very much for your time, and I hope you can take on board some of the points from our presentation. Happy to take any questions with any of the time we've got remaining.
Right, plenty of time. Mike, Jimmy, Phil, Glenn, Vicky, Yanni.
What have I done wrong?
I don't know, but I suspect cycleways might have something to do with it.
I've just got a couple of questions on the cycleways. So you're obviously requesting for us to defer it, and in the long-term plan, the proposed one, it is already deferred. Do you want it deferred even further out? Okay. And so part of your report here talks about the fact that you want the money spent on intersections, Harewood Road, a couple of intersections on Harewood Road, where actually, if you did the cycleway, those intersections would be upgraded. And so you realise, obviously, with the cycleways that the funding is 2 for 1, but if it was just a roading project, it would actually be 1 for 1 if NZTA agreed to it.
That's
and
right.
so that doesn't concern you that would actually lose funding? So,
well, my understanding was that there was a cap on that funding we get each year in terms of cycleways. So is there not?
well, for the wheels to wings, so there is some caps on it, but with the wheels to wings, obviously quite a well-used cycleway, so therefore it would most likely get the 2 for 1 funding, and we'll get staff to answer that question. But we know
that might be worthwhile.
Yeah, but we know for sure. So therefore, if that's the case, if the wheels to wings to wheels, was to get 2 for 1 funding, would therefore your board still want to defer it, or would you actually want to bring it forward so we can actually get those intersections fixed at actually a better cost for the ratepayer?
Well, I think that the first point is that with the traffic lights at Harewood Brains, which we get a lot of feedback on locally, I mean, look, if that was the case, and if we were putting that in and they were coming as part of that, that may be something we'd consider. I think that the general point from the engagement we've had was that, when we've got so many financial pressures as a city, we were looking and being pragmatic in our community as an area where we could save the city money, whether that be deferring it for some time. So we're not saying we're opposed to it entirely. Yeah. We just think that at the moment, if you talk to if you're talking to the public in our communities, it's the fact they can't drive on our roads properly and that they're facing some severe rating pressure. Yeah. So, look, I mean, we'll probably always disagree on that.
Well, it's interesting because obviously the cycleway goes through my ward as well, and
That's
actually
right.
I'm hearing the different thing from my community. They're actually very concerned that these cycleways have been deferred because they're actually a really good thing for not just people trying to get to work on a bike, but also a lot of kids. So I'm hearing an opposite thing from my community. But when you look at the actual funding mechanism and trying to actually make the ratepayer's dollar go even further, the cycleways actually potentially does that because we get a lot of side benefits from just doing the cycleway, which would be the intersection improvements that your community board are actually calling for. So to me, if we're looking for actually trying to improve these intersections, which I agree with we need to do, then potentially trying to defer the cycleway is not the best way to do it. Actually bringing it forward would be, because actually we're going to help the ratepayer out in many ways by the fact that we're getting more funding from both NZTA and central government.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I
don't want to interrupt this wonderful speech,
you're entitled to your view, and we may just have to
yeah, that's right.
I think the one aspect to that is depending on where the wheels to wings cycleway actually goes and which intersections it actually goes through. There's probably 2 or 3 different routes that it's currently being kind of looked at, and at least a couple of those it doesn't go through, specifically the Harewood-Greers intersection. The amended LTP a couple of years ago had I think $2.4 million for an intersection upgrade because it's one of the most dangerous, high-risk intersections along the Harewood Road corridor. So from a safety of all road users point of view, the reprioritisation of spending money towards improving the safety, particularly at that one now that that's also been now deferred from the current LTP. That's of concern for me, as a board, and that's one of the reasons why we're saying look at deferring it. We don't think that the money that the government is subsidising will disappear. The national government obviously started the subsidisation process of cycleways. The current government, I can't imagine it removing. If not, it will increase. So yeah, if the current government wants to come to the table with even more subsidy, let's discuss it then. But under the current budget constraints that the council is in right now, obviously it's developing day by day. The water chlorination issue, the wellheads issue, is growing, dare I say, day by day. This is one aspect that we can say, let's push this back out for now.
Jimmy.
Thank you. One question, because your board particularly recommend the rates to increase the 5% rather than 5.5%. But if we review, if 1% probably $4.5 million, so 0.5 probably $2.25 million. But here you particularly emphasize you still have some of the project or items need to be taken the higher priority. Particularly, you mentioned like the regeneration Bishop Day Mall and the 4 intersection of the your roading, etc. But you propose it's only the wings to wheels cycleway project be deferred to spend those budget to support those 4 intersection the roading area. But I'm just questioning, probably the budget still not sufficient. So do you think what kind of project, either in your board or citywide, probably can be the deferred?
Yes, I think look, you make an interesting point. The reality is we didn't come here today with a list of things we want and things that we can't that we won't have, that we can't fund. So what we're saying by the deferment of the Wheels to Wings is that actually substantially we contribute a lot more back to the city than those local projects we actually want and the community want. So we're not coming in saying, here's 23 million back or whatever it is. We want 23 million more in our community. We're saying, actually, here's 23 million back. We want about 5. So we kind of think we're being responsible in that respect and sort of demonstrating that we're not wanting to take. We're giving back as well, which hopefully reduces that burden on our ratepayers.
Phil.
As a board, we did discuss levels of service around very local and specific projects. I could rattle off a couple now if you'd like.
Sure.
On Creek Road, there's a chairs installation artwork in 2027-2028. It's up for renewal. It's $85,000 for that. There is there's a Westburn Reserve Learn to Ride track. I've eyeballed it myself. It's a fantastic learn to ride facility for children to learn how to ride with road markings and stop signs and all this kind of thing. Again, it's up for renewal, $220,000. It's in really, really good nick.
Right.
So when it comes to levels of service and renewals, having a smarter way of implementing and doing some of these things is something that we've certainly discussed at a board level, and we'd love to be able to bring these things and kind of highlight them to council. Absolutely.
You'll note from the discussion that we had with the external advisory group last week that we want to review levels of service for precisely that reason. So thank you for those examples, Phil.
So, Aaron and Sam, you'll be aware that two of our strategic priorities, one is active travel and the other one is safe communities. So, like, if we take your, referring to Wheels to Wings, if we take your part of the city, you'll be aware the airport is one of the biggest employers in the city. Absolutely. A large number of people commuting to the airport from your area. So if you're saying don't do the Wheels to Wings, but how can you actually, in doing that, how can you actually ensure the safety for people who want to commute to work, to the airport by bike, as compared with those in cars?
I'm probably looking at the catchment area for the Wheels to Wings. There's 2 access roads to the airport, one up Memorial. That's obviously just been improved. It was, well, it still currently is, the most dangerous intersection in Christchurch, but that's, Memorial and Johns Road. But now with the new, absolutely, so, that statistic's probably going to, drop significantly. So there's two access points there now that Wairaki Road's been closed off, and that's up Harewood Road and underneath the underpass, and then the second one's through Memorial. If you're looking at the catchment for the people to use that underpass, and then also the distance that people will cycle, the numbers that our cycling team, Major Cycleways staff team have brought to us, saying that 1,000 people a day are going to cycle from Crofton Road west to the airport. Right now, I don't see it. I've also talked to schools in the area asking about kind of active transport for children and whether or not Major Cycleway would likely lead to an increase in children biking to school, and their impression is that it wouldn't lead to a dramatic increase.
I really would like to know whether other people that have questions are going to focus on the one cycleway, or are we got other issues?
Yep, I was.
You've got another issue, yeah, Glenn.
On social housing, my question. So at the beginning, you pointed out the Housing New Zealand and council units in your ward. You talked about the ageing population. Given that baby boomer bubble is coming through, we'll need obviously to provide for social housing. Whoever delivers it will get in a big pickle. Have you got any ideas over where extra funding would come from for more council units yourself?
Yes, so our submission wasn't advocating for more social housing. I think that the point was at the beginning we were just explaining that there is a demographic within our society that is supported by the council and the government. Yeah.
So the question is around council supplying more units. We didn't actively discuss this at a board level, but if you were to ask my opinion, I would look at upgrading current council units to make them more livable. So you're looking at upgrading insulation to making them a better living environment for the current tenants, rather than expanding the program right now, and waiting to see what the government will bring along from its program and rolling out the housing for social.
I am actually going to give you another 2 minutes because I should have pulled up another councillor before. So Vicky, Yanni, Aaron, if it's within the 2 minutes. So
very brief questions. One, the toilets, can they be done within the existing budget by reprioritising?
I believe so, yes.
Excellent. And the second one, the fuel tax is interesting given that you want to keep rates down. So if, for example, there was a 4 cents per litre fuel tax, that would reduce rates by about 3%. So you're still not looking to have any other sources of income apart from the home asset that people own?
A fuel tax is regressive. It's going to hit low-income families hardest. It would be similar to increasing GST.
Or it's going to hit those who travel most?
Yeah, and low-income families will have vehicles that will be less fuel efficient, and they may even need several vehicles because the public transportation system isn't efficient enough that they could well have 3 vehicles within a family to be able to travel to disperse.
So you'd rather all the costs went on to their house?
Sorry,
You'd rather all the costs went on to rates than spreading any of the...
I think it's around reprioritisation of capital. So as Leanne brought up, the EAG report there last week, that certainly summarised what the board was thinking and discussing. Basically, we believe the money is there within budget. It just needs to be spent better, particularly around procurement.
Yanni?
Thank you. Just a very short question in terms of the Groins Roto Kahutu master plan. Is your board driving that, and do you have a time frame for that being complete?
I don't have a time frame today, but we are driving it. Yeah.
Okay. I'm just really keen to pick up the issue of the toilets, and I'm not quite sure. My understanding is we have to wait for that plan before we can make a decision on the toilets.
Yeah. Well, when I say driving, I think staff are obviously doing the work, and they're going to come back to us once they've done that but we'd like to see this done in the interim, wouldn't we?
Yeah, the biggest issue there, I think, is around the transfer of 30 hectares of land left over or surplus to the extension of or the building of the Western Belfast bypass. There's issues around surveying that land and bringing it into the larger Groins regional park.
So I'm just trying to think what resolution that we can pass that would help you get the toilets.
Well, we can deal with that separately. We're dealing with the hearings today. We'll be working back again through the community board chairs prior to making any resolutions. So don't worry, it won't be lost. And Aaron, I'm sorry, but you're going to be able to have your discussion directly with your own community board. So thank you guys very much for presenting to us today, and well, that's not helpful actually, really. It's just, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could I invite the Ross McFarlane for the Hallswell Hornby Riccarton Community Board to come forward? Look, we've got 20 minutes per community board. I allowed 20 minutes. If people want to ask questions, then please keep the questions focused and short, but also can you let me know that you want to ask a question early on in the piece, because if I don't write your name down, then you aren't going to be added to the list at the last minute if we get to the end of question time. So I'm trying to be fair to everyone. We're under a strict timetable, and I did allow an extra 2 minutes for that one, and one question turned into 3, and that happens from time to time. So I apologise, but that's the way it's going to be. Ross, thank you for stepping in. I know that Mike's not well, and we really appreciate you coming today to present on behalf of the Community Board.
Good morning all, and thank you, Mick, Leanne, councillors and staff. Yes, Mike's not well, and our deputy's offshore. Governance team had a plan B, and
you're it.
That simply said, yeah, we'll draw straws, but last year's budget only allocated 1 straw, so, yeah, hence the position. Thanks for the opportunity. I also like to take this point to thank the staff. I think the levels of information that we have got and received in this long-term plan has been superior to other years, and we've been able to make more informed decisions, particularly relative to costs, etc., and particularly across neighbouring boards. We have a better idea of what our neighbours are doing. So our board considers the council's approach to be pragmatic in its goal of seeking to strike the balance between the many competing demands and funding pressures the city faces. The board acknowledges the big issues for the council over the period of the plan. The focus taken by the council in generally adopting a medium approach and forming its budgets for key infrastructure projects is understandable. The board is pleased with the levels of intended investment as recognition for the intensification and growth occurring in the greater southwest areas of our board. Some of those examples are obviously the Riccarton Community Centre, which the plans aren't finalised, but going forward. The Hornby Customer Services and South West Leisure Centre, an ongoing project. The Chance Road, a couple of issues there, which is mainly to do with the Christchurch Southern Motorway 2 and the interfacing of our areas into those roads, etc. One area our board is disappointed with is that one project, and particularly Bradshaw Terrace. We're extremely disappointed to note that it's been slipped outside the first 3 years of the LTP. It came into the LTP in 2013, I understand. We're often asked to sweat assets. I can absolutely assure you of visiting this area yesterday, this asset is dead. There's nothing left to come out of it. It's buggered. And I think the promises that we've made to the community to restore the level of service back to that area is well overdue. Indicative costs there on your agenda yes, it hurts, but it has to be fixed. We've got to carry on maintaining, and I think we've heard that from the previous unit. Our board, regarding the making progress question and the Christchurch NZ as such, our board sort of see that at $10.2 million they're receiving anyway. Perhaps some alternatives to raise their proposed 1.4 million, maybe the ability for our council holding companies to top those points up. And I know we like to take the return off them, but that's an area where our council holding companies actually return better by having these events, i.e. power, airport, ports, etc. So our point is that we cannot support that additional 1.4 requested by Christchurch NZ. Residential rate rises, that's the toughie. We all know what we're up against there. There's a board is concerned though to note the compounding effect of the projected rate increases over the coming decades. Our example, which I understand our board's followed since 2014 through to 2024 under this long-term plan, puts a reasonably priced house at a 51% increase over that area, that period. So that takes it from 4,795 to 7,241, and that, if you're on a fixed income, I'd suggest is absolutely unsustainable. Rates policy. Rural rates affect our southwest area because of our boundary to rural areas, obviously. In formulating this submission, the board has reflected on the inconsistencies evident in applying the remote rural rates component of the council's current policy. Quick graphic on your overhead there. This is an area in the southwest that has undergone the revision by the council rating staff. This is what they see as the correct rating. The 25s on the board are the ones that receive the remote rural rate. The R's are the ones that pay the residential rate. So these are similar sized properties doing similar things in very close proximity, yet just by being the neighbour to an R or a 25 there, that person's receiving on a base general rate of $4,000 about a $1,000 rebate. And that makes it, pretty, it's a costly area. It's our policy, it's wrong. This come before us in the 2015 long-term plan as well. They proposal, and I thank Councillor Galloway there for bringing it. It will be coming to the Finance Committee, I understand. We need to review this policy. This is the staff doing the best they can with bad policy. You've got R's and 25s as neighbours there, substantial amounts of money, and it needs correction. It will have to be costed, but it's wrong. So we ask the board respectfully requests that the council initiate a review of its present rate policy. The aim to be clearer and more transparent and consistent on the matter. The board agrees that the traditional property Bates race system is not sustainable for our ratepayers in the years covered by this plan, and we do have to look at other alternative forms of income. Not an easy one, this, obviously. We can't keep taking off our council hold companies to the degree we are, but some things that our board considered potentials were the tourist bed tax, airport landing charges, a review there, the free admission for visitors to our museums and art galleries. Perhaps we could, via our airport landing charge, tax them there and give them free entry by default to our museums and our art gallery. The board offers its full support for the indicative funding in the draft long-term plan for the multi-purpose arena. Pretty critical to our area. I think we've seen that. It would be good for our city and the greater regional area, and I think you'll find Mr Broughton will be submitting from the Selwyn District Council tomorrow. He's offering that perhaps the regions should be paying their greatest share for that, as does happen in the Wellington area and the Otago area, I understand. The board also urges the council to optimise the revenue generated from development contributions to keep up with the growth demand. I do note there though that our developers are our allies. We need to get our city to the population we had pre-earthquake. We're not there yet, so these guys help us get there by their developments. It's an easy hit on development charges, and we have got to help them across the line. They have this appearance of being fat cats. I would suggest that's not the case. It's a pretty hard market out there in development at the moment. Flood protection. Well, this is a big cost. A lot of this is residual work and futures works to be undergone in mainly the Hallsville ward, but for the protection downstream of Cashmere Sprayed and Linwood Central out towards the estuary. On completion of the Henderson's Basin as proposed, its surrounds will equate to the area the size of Hagley Park. These important retention and detention assets located primarily in our ward will contribute much to control the flooding for those downstream communities. Accordingly, the board fully supports all such flood protection critical related projects, and we fully support the Strategic Land Acquisitions Fund, and I just note on that had some of those 15, 20-year-old purchases of properties in areas in the southwest not been made 20 years ago, we would not have these options to create these type facilities here. What we pay now will obviously be half of what we could potentially pay, if not more, in the future. Our board on drinking water totally support the council and its initiatives there, and obviously that's got to be our priority. That's as good as a patch on our eye as our good water, so we need that. Transport. Our board fully supports the inclusions of some major projects in the transport area, the Rickman Bus Priority and Public Transport Corridor. These are major works, and that's the effect of it, that graphic there. They are deep down trench works down our most used bus route. That's going to create major upheaval, but the resultant effect, which is on the overhead now, is a real improvement on the street appeal of the area. And yes, it's going to be a tough project, that one. Thank you for the funding. It has to happen. The infrastructure underground is as bad as Bradshaw Terrace. Just moving on, the board also note that there's a number of other strategic corridors, one of them being the Lincoln Road corridor. Our board reiterate its view on the importance of this strategic transport link, and this is to gain access to our new Naipuna Wai. Sorry, I must slide out, Gary. That's all right. Get there. Yep. If we don't get public transport priority down Lincoln Road corridor towards Hallsville Road, we won't have the ability to service these new developments. The roads are clogged now. It's a very small section of road that we're talking about, and it's the link between Wrights Road and Kirtlis Road. Our board fully support that. Waterloo Business Park. Our board very much thank the council for including this increase. This is a critical road link to a fast developing industrial area. The road that presently services it is totally unsuitable. It has gone a wee bit higher than anybody would like, obviously, on projects, and that's primarily because we have to deal with Kiwi Rail and relocation of an important asset to them. The Waterloo Business Park developers, they have been very forward and added considerably to their required development to get this roading link across the line. I'd just like to add that any business that we can get in this business park is one that probably won't go 8 k's to the south and go to Izone at Rolleston. It's pretty important. The board would also like to ask some long-term funding, annual plan funding for some strategic corridors, and here we're particularly talking about the Cashmere Road corridor. We have had some initial briefings on this. This is one that is very, very heavily used by cyclists. It's one of those runs that goes up and goes down. They love obviously the pressure going up and the thrill going down. It is an unsafe link. We had a death there about 2 years ago. The whole area, how the traffic comes into that link, needs to be redesigned, and you can see the scars in the middle on the hills there as we're getting more development up on some of those hill suburbs to the south of Westmoreland there. Westmoreland Cashmere Road has no intersection available, or no good intersection at the bottom of Westmoreland. There's another 400 homes going at the top of Westmoreland, which will take the homes to about 1,200. And we would like consideration in the pretty short term that we get some better access via roundabout or integration. Going back to facilities, yes, thanks for the Riccarton Community Centre, Hornby Library obviously. We're also very supportive of our friends in Linwood Woolston for replacement of their pool, which was a bit like the one in Sockburn. It was removed, so and we're also supportive of the Naval Point project for our Banks Peninsula team. Just regarding benefits, in the southwest we get a lot of amenity area which comes with the areas of stormwater detention, etc. There tends to be a perception that some of that is reserve land. It's able to be used all the time for recreation. Unfortunately it's not. It's flooded for a good percentage of the time. It's very wet. The board has the view that if we are taking reserve areas, that we take the land as opposed to the money. It's easy to take the cash. Once you've taken the cash, it's gone. Whereas if you have the land, you've still got the asset and the benefit and the amenity level that comes with it, which could always be developed better in the future. The board repeats its support for the continuation of the strategic acquisition, and that's primarily as our future proofing of our areas. The board also thank the council for and support the council in their 1.9 million towards the Landmark Grant Fund, or our Heritage Fund, and we in the Riccarton area have just been granted some funding for Chokebore Lodge, which is terrific, and that will add a little historic area to a new development out there beside Riccarton Racecourse. Our other comments, and these are very aspirational, we would like some funding to initiate some appropriate investigation towards the needs of an indoor velodrome. Cycling is one of our most popular sports. Performance cycling is at a level that the facilities we have in Christchurch are sadly lacking. We all know that Invercargill's got better than us, and it was a shame we didn't get the National Performance Cycling Centre when soon after the earthquake. But they are aspirational things that we'd very much like the council to look at. We also thank the council for the continuation of its community grants. These small little grants to people really bring out the best of some of our citizens, and the actual benefit of that is probably uncalculatable. So all in all, we'd also thank the council for returning some of those maintenance issues, and I think that's been touched on in the previous presentation. We're giving our citizens a 5.5% rates rise potentially, we would all like to think we're trying to get something better in the levels of service back. And so, yeah, happy to take questions. I don't know how I'm going for time.
2 minutes 12. So Sarah and then Tim. I think that's probably all we're going to get to. So if we get to you, Phil's after. If we get to him, Sarah.
Thank you. And it's a really comprehensive one, and I thank you for that. Just quickly, there's just a bit of a disconnect between two of the comments here. I was trying to understand with the landmark heritage, and I can completely understand wanting to be able to do those once in the central city, those key landmarks and the grant for that. And yet you're very firm that you're really reluctant to have the rates increases. Was the board aware, because the wording isn't particularly clear in the document, I don't think, that the continuation of the 1.9 million per annum to the landmark grant fund would mean a rates increase on top of the 5.5?
I didn't read it as that.
Yeah, so
Sarah,
I think that at the moment it kind of reads like we've already budgeted for it and shall we continue it? But actually it's not in the draft currently, and adding the 1.9 would mean probably a 0.4% on top of the 5.5. Was the board aware of that?
I think, in relation to heritage, it's a difficult one. We've got to protect the heritage. Right. Similarly to the Christchurch NZ, figure of about 0.4. Can we afford it? Well, anything hurts, obviously.
That's it. I was just checking on how the question was read and whether you thought,
I think we'd have to say yes if it could be slotted in, but where those other savings are made, that's the difference.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. Thank you to you and your board, firstly, for your support on the flood protection, and also the Cashmere Road corridor, which is, we all know, affects Balsall, Westmoreland, Craycroft, Cashmere, Thorrington, Bowen Vale, St Martins, Murray Ainslie, and the Port Hills and the Hillsborough communities. So thank you for that. My question to your board, and we have had a combined community board over the 4 lane of Lincoln Road. Would your board be supportive in trying to figure out the planning between Lincoln Road, between Whiteley and Barrington intersection, which is already gridlocked as we know at times, and Morehouse Ave? Because if we go to 4 lane to Whiteley, Barrington, etc., and then we're still going to have a gridlock into the community, because we've seen what's happened to the Waltham community and the Sydenham community and the Eddington community when we've got 4 lane of Bowen Street. So what do you...
I think
an answer along the lines of yes or no would be acceptable at this point. I think probably yes.
Given that the level of investment that we've taken in land acquisition and the very specific point between Wrights and Curlett's Road, the designation's been in place for some 15 odd years. We own most of the land. There's a few more properties to buy. We're buying a component of it as a designation and requirement from the Health Board for the frontage for the Norwest Arch, which links Domain Terrace through to NX Road. We're doing that now. The area is changing predominantly to commercial via the medical centre and a new supermarket down there. To me, it is, if you like, it's the net between the sandglass. We've got flow one end and it flows out the other. It's that neck of the sand in the hourglass that just throttles. I think we've made preparation for it. It's a high on the list for our from our network people and the team that presented it, Richard Holland. I think we've got to go ahead with it. But I don't like the word 4-laning. To me, if we use multi-mode with public transport priority, we'll get a better level of acceptance. And obviously the subsidies too that we get by putting in public transport. Remember that the section south into Hallsville is State Highway 75. If we do our bit, NZTA will do their bit. And I think we've seen that of recent government announcements too.
That's excellent. Look, thank you. Thank you, Ross, and thank you for stepping in and playing this role. It's been greatly appreciated and it's been a very valuable submission. So thank you very much.
Good luck with deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be seeing you before then. Could I invite Linda Stewart for the Coastal Burwood Community Board Submissions Committee, along with Tim Sinters and Kim Money. Thank you all for coming this morning. And as usual, stunning photographs to greet us to your submission.
Good morning, Leanne, councillor and staff. Pardon? In your photos? Sorry, Dion. I know you're famous, but you know.
Famous in his own backyard.
As I said, good morning. So today with me I have Linda Stewart, who is our Submissions Committee Chair, Tim Sinters, our Deputy Chair, and Jo Wells, our Governance Manager. You might recall in the annual plan I likened the city of Christchurch to a house, and the Coastal Burwood ward was the living room with a huge panoramic window. So how's the house and the living room doing? The family, that's everybody here, made a great start on the living room, with a new children's play area just outside the room, and a few other improvements are in the pipeline which we appreciate. However, the family revised its LTP budget for the house, and unfortunately the issues and future potential of the living room were not reflected in the family's new budget. The question is, does the family really appreciate the full potential of this room? Currently there are budget items missing. The living room requires an LTP commitment from the family in order for this room to catch up. The commitment and investment would attract residents, visitors, provide huge recreational opportunities, increase rate take, bring value and worth to the recovery and regeneration of not only the living room, but also the rest of the house. So what does this potential actually look like? The LTP talks about areas of growth. Here are some of our current and potential growth areas. On the top left we have 2 new high schools, got residential red zone, Preston subdivision, QE2, Burwood Hospital, New Brighton foreshore developments, and New Brighton master plan. And we appreciate and acknowledge your support for DCL and the work that they are doing. The question is, do you see us as a growth area? Community initiatives. We mention this because our community do not just have their hands continually held out, but on the contrary, their hands are continually getting stuck in. Our amazing community have raised and contributed millions of dollars towards events and fantastic community facilities. Well done to them. We appreciate and acknowledge you. It is essential that our existing and proposed LT items are retained for our board. An LTP question. Has the council got the balance right? Our board said no, primarily because temporary flood protection instead of permanent, no budget. Estuary edge earthquake repairs, replacing what we had, no budget. Styx River catchment issues, no budget. Regeneration plan strategies, no budget. On the slide above you see here Thompson Park car park and Rafferty Domain tennis courts. Thompson Park is a highly utilised park and skate park by the beach. Safety issues need addressing and are a great concern to us, the community and the police. We require additional budget next year to concurrently address the car park and the safety issues. Rafferty Domain alongside Thompson Park has an 11-year-old management plan. Other than 2 items, the sports turf and the tennis court renewals, which the board want retained, there is no budget to implement the plan. The board requests $350 per annum for the next 5 years. We have also highlighted other things in our written submission, like the New Brighton Bridge renewal. The plague of biblical proportions, the midges, Linwood Central Heathcote. Very pleased to see budget allocated. However, for the full midge management plan to be implemented, this needs to be increased to $360 a year for 10 years. Program reprioritisation for earthquake catch-up is needed. For example, up on the screen, this is Cocaine Reserve by Wainoni Bridge on New Brighton Road. This historical reserve car park is used to store construction material. It's now a real eyesore. Other examples, New Brighton and Breezes Road potholes and flooding on Pages in New Brighton Road. Transport. On the left, as I've just explained, this is what we have. On the right is what we would actually quite like. However, we note that the prioritisation of works is based on condition and traffic volume. This is a concern that the east current low traffic volume roads that are in poor condition may not meet this threshold. Where does earthquake and regeneration sit with this criteria? Through community conversations and the LTP engagement, our community repeatedly told us that the 206 million on cycleways is not a priority given the day-to-day issues they still face, and our board agrees. A higher priority for our community in relation to transport was invest and improve our public transport connections and services. You can't get a whole family on a bike, but you can get a whole family on a bus. In principle, we support cycleways. However, we request that Council ask the Government to extend the subsidy as this city is still in a recovery stage. Indirect impacts of all the aforementioned issues to our community are and have been social, health and safety, economic, psychosocial and social degradation, to name a few. This is in direct contrast to what we, the Council, are aiming towards. I quote the LTP Have Your Say document: Christchurch, a place of opportunity for all, a place that is open to new ideas, new people and new ways of doing things, a place where anything is possible. This is a great vision. This is the positive lens that needs to be worn when finding budget and solutions for our ward. Tim.
Okay, next photo. Temporary flood protection. This is an aerial shot of South Shore, showing the temporary bund, which protects about 500 families in their homes. The next photo is on the left-hand side. You see a picture of an existing wall that was there and it got pulled down after the earthquake got damaged. And you can see on the right-hand side, that's what it looks like now. Next page shows what a big tide looks like. It's quite nerve-wracking for the residents. And after, this is a flood line after the big tide on the 2nd of February. As you can see, the temporary bund got overtopped. Luckily there wasn't a big weather event with it. A real worry. Even though we are thankful for the temporary bund, it has given little long-term confidence to the families that live there. They are now finding out that some people are trying to build, to bind their section and getting their plans done, are having trouble getting their resource consents. This is not good for the community. That is trying to get itself back on its feet. This is to do with being in the high flood area zone. Let me remind you that a big part of Christchurch would be in this zone if it was not for the stop banks in the Waimak, Sumner and Avon River. Temporary stop banks do not give anybody confidence. Would you go for a long drive with your family and if your mechanic had said that he had done temporary repairs on your brakes? As you will see in the latest slide, the South Shore residents asked a coastal engineer, Gary Tier, to do a plan for the permanent protection of the estuary. I'll talk to that later. We feel this plan is exciting as it covers all the needs, i.e. protection, aesthetics, natural looking, with a cycle walkway on top. What is a concern in the Regen Strategy Plan for South Shore and South Brighton is there is no budget. This is a worry. On to South New Brighton. Yeah. You can see in this picture here, this is a picture of some Reno mattresses that weren't damaged in the earthquake, and they're performing very well. You can see the trees behind are in excellent condition. And of course, next photo will show you another particular bit where it's undamaged and going very well there.
And white gum boots.
Yeah. Next photo, this is an example of the problem we are now facing. We have lost approximately 20 trees with another 30 at risk of going this year, with another 60, 70 behind them. Apart from being unsightly, these pose a big danger to the users of the council walkway alongside. The local campground is next to this and has visitors from all over the world. What an impression they must get when they see this. See the next slide? I must remind you too, see that tree there that's falling over, that's falling towards the pathway. It got hung up there on another tree. This is happening all the time, and this is what we're going to end up if we do nothing about it. There's so many trees there, this is not a quick fix. If we don't protect it, we're going to get this mess forever. Each tree costs between $4,000 to $5,000 to remove. There's approximately 100 trees there at risk. Contractors who have been doing the work on the nearby jetty and surroundings have quoted $550,000 to repair the estuary edge. If we don't do this, we will look at this danger we face for many years to come. And we can go back to that plan there. Gary Tier, Coastal Engineers Plan. Imagine this showcasing our area with adaptation to future weather events an amazing cycle walkway nature visit. As we all know, the vistas are stunning and the amount of people appreciating it now is amazing. This could link up to all the cycle lanes, walkways around the estuary. In fact, wouldn't it be great if we could have a barge like they do in Nelson that takes people and cyclists to Redcliffe to link up with the cycleway there. And if you see on the next photo there, this is Gary's plan. It's a soft edge. He's even drawn a bit of a plan like it could be a Goblet Island, the yellow place there. This is the vision. It could be absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Kim.
Thanks, Dan. I'm going to talk about the Styx River Catchment Working Party consisting of Papanui Innes, Coastal Burwood Community Boards and the community. This working party has been meeting since July 2017 to provide community input into a decision making about the Styx River catchment, particularly in its lower reaches. The catchment extends 24.8 kilometres from Harewood, Bishopdale through to Belfast, and more recently Preston's development drainage exits into the Styx River. Concerns have been identified, and we can go to those if you want questions later. The recommendations: 1, an increase of 400,000 annually between 2018 and 2021. That is to do further dredging of the river blockages areas where identified as appropriate. Number 2, long-term budget requirement of 600,000 for a long-term strategy. Both the boards saw this as vital for a Styx River master plan, for a 100-year plan, with staff and community engagement involved. And number 3, long-term budget requirement of 40 million, and we'd ask you to refer to the GDH report, a one-off action over a 3-year period to compensate for the under-maintenance of the river since 1993. More recently, we've learned of other concerns. The board has fielded concerns from the community that point to the Aranui pumping station and the wastewater systems under-providing, and it seems that the build was not to manage future growth. This also includes evidence by reports of groundwater entering the sewer system and sewer breaches into the Avon River. This means increasing pollution breaches will be a serious environmental and health issue. And moving back to Burwood again, an area-wide community meeting facility for Burwood. 3 suburbs equal 1 community facility. Of all the city's suburbs devastated by the Canterbury earthquakes, Burwood, Avondale and Darlington were hit far worst. By the worst. They lost their neighbours, shops, churches and schools. And more than that, they lost their sense of community belonging as they continue to face constant change. Social isolation is a major concern. There is no meeting facility in any of these suburbs. There weren't prior to the earthquakes. The subsequent residential red zoning, followed by formation of Regenerate, held the community to ransom. However, there have been no recovery projects that have been planned in all this time. These communities, the people, have really suffered. Last year, the board, aware of these concerns, actioned a research study for coastal Burwood wards. This showed very clearly a need for a community meeting facility in the west of the ward. The board has also received a deputation seeking support to save the Burwood School Hall for community use when it was publicised that the Burwood Primary School would be demolished. The concerns go back that far. Earlier this year, with funds from the Community Resilience Partnership Fund, a feasibility study has been approved to scope what this community facility could look like and what it would provide. That study is underway and will be completed before year end. Very recently, the board received a letter on behalf of Burwood, Avondale and Darlington organisations. These include 3 respective residents' associations, 2 churches and a trust. They are asking the board to request council register an interest in purchasing the land currently in disposal process by the Ministry of Education. This site was previously the Burwood Primary School. The board is fully supportive of this location. In fact, it is likely to be the only potential site for an area-wide meeting facility. Therefore, it asks the council to expedite the process, the purchase process. I believe that's underway, and to set aside funds for a community facility build project. Councillor Livingston and myself are willing to continue working together to gauge potential for a public-private funding project, and there is potential for other entities to be included. After almost 8 years of being on hold, we feel this project should be expedited to allow the broken communities to rebuild. And moving to issues at Kiwi2 Park. We ask that a feasibility study on demand and supply of a 50-metre deep water facility be added to Kiwi2's existing, we're waiting for, to be opened pools. And we think the timing should be 2020, which would give the high schools time to impact on the 25-metre that we're currently using, will be using, and for a build prospect planned for 2021. A whole generation of children in the east have missed out on one of the most significant life skills to master, swim capability. A child aged 6 in 2011 is now attending high school, while our eastern communities and outlying districts look forward with excitement to the opening of our new facility. The pressure on capacity planning for the 2-metre deep pool is already a concern for the board. Children and youth must be given every opportunity to become aqua proficient and have access to deep water sports. So must adults, especially older people who are big lane users. The board has concerns with the pool programming for the 25-metre pool and already sees limited access for community use from opening day onwards, as user groups dominate this deep water pool space and community providers provide with only 3 lanes. While we accept that some of the user groups will transfer to the sports metro, we see the increased demand will be from the new residential developments and the 3 high schools. In particular, the pressure added by Avonside Girls High and Shirley Boys High being at Kiwi2 Park. It concerns us greatly that community will lose access to the schools. Very few from the east will transfer use to the sports metro because it is inaccessible in time and cost to do anything other than an occasional visit. This disadvantages coastal and eastern communities. From many quarters, community have expressed their concerns loud and clear. Letters to the editor, media reporting, Facebook groups and deputation direct to board. And recently, the Kiwi2 Park Master Planning event, which attracted a great number of people, registered their concern that Kiwi2 will need a 50-metre pool. The Aquatics Facility Plan assessment informed that the Eastern Aquatic Facility needs to cater for a population of 60,000. Clearly, as community have been trying to tell its community board and council, another deep water pool is required, and this board stands behind Councillor East and Councillor Livingston's call, along with the community's call, for another pool to be fast-track built at Kiwi2. Thank you.
The New Brighton War Memorial south of the pier. Graffiti and vandalism led to these current panels. The New Brighton RSA community and our board believe they have created a visual barrier and detract from the memorial. The board would like to lead a collaborative project. Removing the panels and re-landscaping would not only create an attractive space for reflection and commemoration, but would draw more people to use the area, therefore reducing the likelihood of vandalism. $300 million capital acceleration fund. You can see up there we've suggested a couple of things there, and the board would like to be part of the discussions with council on this funding. LTP documents. Yep, that just about sums it up, not just for me but also the community. Sourcing LTP information specifically for our ward was extremely difficult and time consuming for us, let alone the community. We appreciate the improvements that have been done, but there needs to be more. Improvements must be made if there is to be greater, active and well-informed submission participation. And for planning, transparency and future community boards, line items need to remain in APs and LTPs, and we request that action. Our ward hosts local, national and international events, which I show you every month in our board report. Because our foreshore is a metropolitan asset, there is increased usage in hot weather and at event times. Therefore, greater levels of maintenance and subsequent budget is required for and in this unique environment. So in conclusion, the community board and our residents believe that our ward requires greater investment to give us equity with the rest of the city. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. I've got Vicky, Glenn and Sarah, but I don't think we're going to get through all of those because we've got 23 seconds to go. So Vicky, you were number one.
Top priority in the red zone, given that you can now lease the land for 5 years, what would you most like to have happen there as quickly as possible?
Really good question. I think the thing, we haven't actually discussed that for a board, but we know that the cycleway, the recreational cycleway is actually going to be put through there. So, beg your pardon? We're aware of it, but we haven't actually discussed what our top priority would be.
I think it'd be fair to
was
say
only
that the
announced
green
last
spine
week.
would be used.
Or week
We'd
4.
maximise that.
Yeah.
And had the same briefings we have over government changes over.
Next question.
No, it's not the point. The point is that the question is in relation to whether you've given some thought to temporary use within the residential red zone as a community board. No. Thank you. All right, well, look, thank you very much. That's to the end of the time, so much appreciated. And, of course, a lot of detail in there, and, you know, you've obviously gone to a lot of trouble, so I'd like to thank you on behalf of all of the councillors. Thank you. And if we could now adjourn the meeting until 11:10 a.m. Thank you. It's 11:11. Welcome, Ali, on behalf of the Papanui Innis Community Board. Could people settle down, please, and take your seats? Thank you. Enough of this jibber-jabber. Sorry, that was my favourite television program. Boston Legal. Just saying.
Sorry, battery's a bit low. Can you just
Bear with. It's another one of my favourite television programs. Miranda.
Okay. Right, hi. Thanks
Hi.
for having us. We're going to be a little bit like the two Ronnies here. We've got all our information, but we're going to just kick each other under the desk as we get to the bits we're going to talk about. I'm Ali Jones from Papanui Innis, and
I'm Emma Norris, Deputy Chair.
one of the hardest things for our board to see clearly what the community is to see clearly what the community needs, hearing what the community needs, and knowing that we have nothing that we can take out of the draft LTP in our ward. Of course, boards, anyone can request new things be included in the draft LTP without understanding it has to be give and take. Things go in, things have to come out. We've all heard that. The Papanui Innis board doesn't have anything to take out because we have nothing in there that isn't major infrastructural work, land drainage program, cycleways, those kinds of projects. That said, we do have some requests and some arguments to back up our requests for funding of projects in our ward. One of the jewels in the Papanui Innis crown is the Styx River and the surrounding environs. And this is something that Emma has been working with staff and with residents on, so I will throw it over to her.
So we've worked closely with the Styx River Catchment Working Party, and our board supports the resolutions included in our submission, which came from them. But we do note it will be subject to the land drainage staff determining the timing of the works within their project prioritisation. However, we would like to specifically mention the need for further dredging and continued weed cutting, which clearly has a financial impact, but is absolutely key to managing and maintaining this river. We also support the development of a Styx River master plan and the necessary funding required to make that happen. This is essential as a foundation from which we can work to ensure the sustainability of the Styx River.
And the full information around the Styx is in attachment A on our submission. Now the traffic, and some really lovely photos up there. Can you go back? Some really lovely photos of what has been done in the Styx, and we have a very engaged community here, school children, supported actually by excellent work from council staff. The traffic in our ward is one of probably the number one concern our residents have and have had for some time. The Hills Road end of Westminster Street, which you can see here, has a playground, a preschool, Motorho Primary, Christchurch Park, and there is a building there that may be used by the community in the near future. And that means a large number of children and families are regularly crossing this increasingly busy road. There is no safe crossing point on this road until you get to Cranford Street, which is about 1.5 kilometres in the other direction. And that's not really very safe some days either. Now, the board is requesting funding for a pedestrian refuge to ensure that our children and families can safely cross Westminster Street. Another part of this issue of traffic and related to traffic is school speed zones. And I know this is a concern across a number of boards. In our ward, in the Papanui Innis ward, we have 15 primary schools, 2 intermediates and 3 high schools. We have a very, very high concentration of schools. And in fact, we have a very high concentration of families and children living in our ward. The Papanui Innis Community Board continues to support the citywide 40-kilometre an hour school zones and that they be maintained at $500,000 for the 2018-19 financial years to allow the program to be accelerated. And all schools currently on the waiting list need to have speed zones installed. Still with traffic, in the Christchurch Northern Corridor, or the CNC, is one of the biggest roading projects in the city. bringing more than 20,000 cars. I think I've heard the figure, Mike, up around 28,000 through that Innes Road intersection. How many? There you go, double it. Maths has not been my strong point. 55,000 through that intersection. Into the ward from the north, and that's clearly going to have implications for the residential areas in which the project ends, which is that Innes Road, Cranford Street area, and then into Edgware and St Albans. Again, a very high residential area with a lot of families and children. Now we call this, and it's been called by the council as well, the downstream effects to the CNC, to the Northern Corridor. And the board's contention is the funding for the work to counter these effects is in the LTP at the wrong time. Now the downstream effects will be felt as soon as the project is finished in mid-2020, but it's currently the bulk of the money is in the 2021 component of the draft LTP, and we suggest that work needs to be completed before then to ensure that we are ready, and it's currently in there too late. Right, major cycleways, routes.
We do not support the deferral of the completion of the cycleway program in our ward, specifically the Northern Line cycleway. This is partly built already and is well used by residents and children across the ward. However, it's missing a vital link between Tuckers and Starrocks Road, and cyclists are currently using a grass verge beside the railway line to get to where they want to be. Obviously, this is a health and safety issue, as they're riding about a metre away from the railway track. So we want to see that cycleway finished as soon as possible.
And that's unfenced as well, so they're right there up against the track. The board's concerned that slowing the delivery of the program will cost council more in the long term, and I think that's a really key point. And I know one of the issues we understand that the issues across the city around quality of roads and pavements, and we'll get to that in a minute, particularly in the Shirley part of our ward. But the Greers Northcote Sawyers Arms Roads intersection, the highest accident rate for pedestrians in our ward. We've had one fatality and a significant number of car accidents. Northcote Road will become busier once the CNC, the Northern Corridor, is completed. It was actually meant to be completed already around about 2 years ago, but it keeps being deferred. And again, this is a health and safety issue. The new subdivisions around Highstead, Cavendish and Gardeners Roads are creating more traffic heading down Sawyers Arms Road towards this intersection, because it's not going to get any better.
We have a couple of streets in Richmond which we are pushing for to get included in the LTP. Nichols Street and also Randall Street. We'll talk some more about the issues in this area of Shirley in a moment. However, these particular streets need to be singled out for urgent inclusion in the renewal program. They were on the program. Well, Nichols Street was on the program, but has now been pushed off. And we also support the remaining 1/3 of Randall Street. 2/3 of it is being done, but the other third isn't, so we want the whole lot to be done. Residents have come to the board on more than one occasion about this.
And we are hearing from them regularly as well via email and phone calls, which is, that's our job, but we need to raise it with you as well. In August 2017, the Mayor, who's always been passionate about the resilience and well-being of communities, said, and I quote, "The most important element is connecting communities and encouraging active citizenship. To that end, our ward needs facilities for our community." There is nothing in the draft LTP, new community facility-wise, for our ward for the next 10 years. Nothing, zilch, zip. Nothing for the next 10 years. This is despite parts of our ward in dire need of such facilities. There are projects in train and we're grateful for those. However, they're a long time coming and they're still not complete. Some have been delayed. St Albans Park, the best used park in our ward, has been unusable since February 2011 and was in poor condition prior because of drainage. That is now underway and is looking fantastic. Can't wait for that to happen. However, of course, with the winter here now, it's going to be at least another 1 to 2 seasons before, or autumn and winter and into the summer before it can be used. And we have the very reasonably priced St Albans Community Centre, which has been delayed because of an objection to the resource consent. Our ward, our Papanui Innes ward, has been forgotten in many ways, particularly the Shirley area. An area that is in the east, but not the east we hear so much about. No big pool complex or hot pools here. I won't tell you what you already know, but we do want to emphasise that this area particularly continues to struggle, to be stressed by ongoing major land drainage work, which combined with major roading projects has seen residents deal with noise, dust, vibrations, roadworks, closures and general disruption for almost 5 years. This is where we need community amenity, community facilities. Hence the top priority of funding for a community facility to replace the well-used and much-loved Shirley Community Centre at 10 Shirley Road. Now, this may not be replaced as a community centre, but it is a community facility needed. It has been in and out of the LTP and annual plan like a yo-yo over the last 5 years. The community has been consulted, they have an expectation, and that expectation has been dashed more than once. The funding of $153,000 was originally allocated in the 2020-2021 financial year to begin consultation and design work, and was brought forward to 2018-2019, which is where we thought it was at the end of our last workshop, and there was to be subsequent funding. However, when the draft LTP came out, it was nowhere to be seen for the next 10 years. That means nearly 20 years until this community gets a replacement facility on this site. We would like this reinstated. We have a list of people in the area who support the reinstatement of this community centre or community facility, and we can leave those names with you. I think an important thing to remember too is that there are 8 schools in Shirley, again reflecting its residential and family aspect. 65% of residents are families with children. It's one of the highest percentages in the city. And census figures show that 21.2% of the population is between 0 and 15 years, compared with a city average of 17.8. This community is close to breaking point. They need a place to meet and to gather. To repeat, the funding of $153,000 originally allocated in the 2020-2021 financial year to begin consultation and design work was brought forward to 2018-2019 plus subsequent funding, and we would like this reinstated.
We move on now to the St Albans Community Facility. The board requests a further $350,000 in funding, as we've had the opportunity to purchase the section next door, which will future-proof the project for the community, providing much-needed green space in this high-density residential area. This was in fact something investigated 4 to 5 years ago with the backing of the council. However, with a house on the section, it became problematic and was not progressed. And we would also like to reaffirm that the original funding is carried forward from the current year to next year. Moving on now to Belfast. There is a new school being proposed for Belfast, which we see as an opportunity to work with the ministry and the school to build a new library for the community. These have been built around the city before and they work well. So we believe this is an opportunity that should not be missed. The Belfast Library has been included in the long-term plan for a number of years now, but has been completely pushed off this current draft.
It's also identified Belfast as a significant area of Christchurch to experience growth over the next 8 years, and the Christchurch City Council has in fact acknowledged that with the establishment of the Belfast Area Plan. Now, the Edgware Community Pool.
The board is requesting that the council fund $5 million to the Edgware Pool Group to enable this asset to be completed. The Edgware Pool is not an aquatic facility like the council pools. It is a community facility, a gathering place, a safe place for people of all ages to meet, a place for children and adults to learn to swim, and a warm pool for the community to use for exercise and relaxation year-round. In the summer there is outdoor space which will be landscaped, and there will also be an indoor teaching pool.
There have already been inquiries made to the pool group for people who want to provide the learners pool service. That's actually an income stream for the group, and there's certainly interest from providers in the ward. And this is one of the issues in the area too around Edgware. We've got this still in the planning process. So that will sort of change the focus in the area traffic-wise as well. But we do want to say that this group has worked incredibly hard to get to this point. They have spent a huge amount of money out of their own pocket. And when you talk about community partnerships, this is an ideal example of exactly that type of partnership. But a partnership is two-way. And there has been some support from the council to this point, but we believe that there should be more, and financially that is a big part of this as well, remembering that there would be no operating expenses that would continue with the pool. And this also demonstrates, when we look at what's happening across the city with other bids for pools, this is about equity. This has a budget of around $5 million to be up and running, so you can see it's good value for money with no operating expense, and certainly improves the equity of spend for these types of facilities across the city.
The board also requests that the council put funds into the long-term plan for outdoor youth facilities in the Papanui and Redwood areas, such as a skate park or basketball courts. This stemmed from a meeting we had with a group of young people in Papanui who were calling out for more recreation space. There are a number of playgrounds, lots of open green space and parks, but nothing for the youth of the area.
Well, that's our submission. I just want to reiterate again, or we would like to reiterate. Oh no, we've got strengthening communities funding, sorry. This has been obviously an issue for a number of boards as well, with the reduction over the last financial year. There has not been an increase to cover inflation in the last 10 years for strengthening communities funding. We have a very engaged ward as far as community groups go, and as a very active board working with these community groups, and we cannot continue to absorb the costs that have been reduced, or the costs that we have to absorb because of the reduction in funding. Our communities and the strength and well-being of our communities actually make for a stronger city. And if we cannot continue to support these groups, we believe that will weaken not only our ward, but the city across the whole of Christchurch. Thank you.
Right, Glenn, Jimmy.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm just curious over the Shirley Road facility. I noticed there's a, obviously the temporary facility at McFarlane Park, at Emmett Street, 106 to 108, the community church as well. So I'm just, how much needs analysis has been undertaken by way of provision, the need for provision for community facilities?
We've been doing that, and staff have been doing that for the last 4 or 5 years. And what we're finding is that the church facilities are now basically fully, they're at capacity. There's a new one that's just been set up at the Shirley Working Men's Club on Hills Road. Fantastic. What they've done there is basically gut it and completely, redo it. They are at capacity, and there are still groups in the area that require space to meet. This is not casting aspersions against those who are church-going people or Christians, but there is a perception sometimes that people want a secular space. So that is something that we have to deal with in the ward as well. We met a couple of groups, one I can think of, which is a Probus group. So this is affecting older people as well as younger people particularly. This Probus group is based in Shirley and was based in Shirley before the earthquakes. They now travel to New Brighton to meet, and they want to come back and meet in the area. That is one of around about 8 groups that we've heard from, and we have information from all of them, and staff are still collating that. So there is definitely a need, and we're not going to argue for something that we don't believe there is a need for.
And you also
got a needs analysis? Have you actually got a document?
Yes. Yeah, well, we can get, yes, of course.
You also mentioned McFarlane Park. That provides for a very concentrated area of high need in Shirley, around that McFarlane Park area, sort of bounded by Quinns Road, Shirley Road, that specific area.
And Housing New Zealand's about to, we believe, start a new building plan there as well, and that will increase the density and the number of families there using that facility. So they are very different and should not be confused as far as needs go, but I appreciate your request for the information and we'll get it.
Jimmy?
Okay, thank you. I didn't hear from your community board regarding to the proposed long-term plan. The rates will be increased up to the 5.5%. What's your response?
We haven't taken a view on that, Councillor Chen, because we've been focusing very much on the community facilities.
Okay, yeah, if that's true, because based on your presentation, if you're seeking additional sum of the project, Like you mentioned, Edgeware Community Pool, they were probably for the $5 million. Another two, St. Albans, the community facilities is $350K plus Belfast Library Service for the another $150K. If total together is about $5.5 million, they probably increased rates about 1.2 percentage plus, you know. So, what's your point of view?
Well, I think the point that the point that we made that I have to reiterate is that we would very much like to put something in to counter the funds that we're asking for. Unfortunately, unlike other wards, we don't have anything that we can swap because the spend in our ward is almost entirely infrastructural projects, roading, land drainage, multiple millions of dollars, but actually when it comes down to community amenity and facility, there is nothing there. So I can't really answer your question, but what I'm asking is perhaps that we could look at more equity across the city, and maybe there are other wards that might be able to cut back what they're asking for in order to enable our communities to get a bite of the pie.
Okay, thank you.
Yanni?
Just quickly, there is a huge amount of money being spent on the...
Sorry, you got away with that.
The northern arterial, the downstream effects.
Yep.
Have you looked at those budgets in terms of budget savings? Because it does seem like some of them, like Barbados Street, have several million on dollars.
What was that street, sorry?
Barbados Street and Madras Street have several million, and it's quite hard to know how that money could be, you know, spent. I mean, it seems like a lot of money you've got for those roading projects. So I was just wondering if there's any of those roading projects that you've identified that actually could be reduced in scope to fund some of the things you want.
We have already gone back to staff to ask that, and some of those projects, the Barbados area that you're talking about particularly, some of it goes into central obviously, so there's a ward share.
No, like when we asked for it, we asked for information back, but the consultation's already gone out. So...
Yeah, but we're just about to consult on that as far as getting traffic into the city. That's the downstream effect stuff. Yeah. I'm not entirely understanding what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't know quite where that boundary is, but you know, it just is for putting some lines on the road, several $1 million.
It's not just lines on the road. I mean, the problem, and this is what we've raised a lot when we've looked at the cost of some of these works. Some of them seem to be very basic road renewals, but and you know this, Yanni, too. Once you take out gutters and you put new guttering in and all that kind of stuff, as well as widening the road, traffic lights at 250 to 500k a pop. It's frustrating, but it's very, very expensive. And look, I'm not an accountant or roading engineer, so I can't answer that. Yeah.
Oh, thank you very much. Look, thank you for your time and presentation. It's very good. It's very valuable having all of this input into the LTP. Thank you. And could I now invite Pam Richardson and the team from Banks Peninsula Community Board?
I just thought I'd put up my label so that you know who we are. It's a recycled label, so it's very valuable to have it. And our board plan, which we focus on. So have a seat, ladies. So this morning I've got with me Tori Pedden, who's the Little River Wairera representative, and of course Joan Latchford, who's our governance advisor on my left. Look, it was a challenging morning, and attached to our presentation we have put the Banks Peninsula Community Board submission summary for you, a one-pager that gives you an outline of what we've got, and of course our submission is it's very full, yeah, I would love to see a time on top of these that we could actually be watching or the ticking over, because that clock has actually gone, so we haven't got much of an opportunity to follow what's going on. Anyway, I liken myself to Kim, and that we are the garden. Kim talked about her house and her living room and rooms of her house. We are the garden, Banks Peninsula. And the Banks Peninsula, as you see, those are some amazing photographs of our area. So I wanted to then into how we fit in with the city. And this next slide shows 100,000 hectares on the right-hand side, and the very small area on the left at the top there of the city. So we've got 651 kilometres of county roads, 331 of which is 331 of unsealed. We've got 145 council parks, 116 local community parks, 8 garden parks, and heritage parks, 6 sport parks, and 15 regional parks. We've got 14 cemeteries based across the peninsula. We've got 7 major sport and recreation amenities in the area, and the Akaraa is the only cruise port at the moment in Canterbury, and we had over 200,000 visitors from the cruise ship season. So that's where we fit into the city, and what we want for the long term is a fit for future infrastructure. Infrastructure is very important for us. Over the years it has been, well, I heard people talk about sweated. Sounds like an awful term, but a lot of the facilities on Banks Peninsula have they're getting near the end of their life, and they need to be maintained to a better standard, or we start the planning process of a new one. The next one is about our transport, about our roads and our wharfs. Now, this is where we've heard the most information from our communities. Of course, a lot of our information in this submission has come from the very many meetings that we've had, the reserve management committees that we work with, so we have many opportunities of working with our communities. So we pick up a lot of information, and our submission is based on that information that we collect from our communities. So this is an area where we're looking at doubling budgets because of the road metalling. Our roads are in very poor condition, and as I looked back over the weekend, I found a document that was 1998, Banks Peninsula District Council roading policy, and the same issues we are dealing with today. The base structure of those roads is in poor condition. We have not been able to improve the situation with the budget that we've been achieving over the years. So that will be in the system somewhere that will allow you to see what is being talked about. The culvert renewal programs is another one. As we're seeing increased storms on the peninsula, we need to make sure that our drainage is improved, and that the culverts are far too small. They're small culverts, they need a lot of maintaining. We need to see a greater budget to improve those. We need to see that the funding be brought forward for the Diamond Harbour Wharf renewal. The wharf is, Diamond Harbour Wharf is part of a network, part of a roading network, a tourism opportunity, and there are difficulties with it and its safety of it. So we're looking also for the start work soon as on the Akaraa Wharf renewal. When we ask for a renewal, for wharf renewal projects, we are asking that we actually, as our community, becomes clear to us when they're in the planning process, and there's some certainty that they are going to be looked at some stage, and a little bit of money to start a project would be very welcome to get the planning going through with our communities, because a lot of these projects, for example, the Akaraa Wharf will have to go through a number of steps to come out the other end. It is a historic wharf, and there will be a number of steps that need to go through. Safe drinking water, or the 3 waters, is another area where we want to see that we're improving the situation on Banks Peninsula. Unfortunately, the first one there, the Cairns Bay potable water supply, is in a community that has got a camping ground that is very popular. It's got a museum, a school, but it's got a very small base population. And at the moment, that water supply is it doesn't meet the standards at all. It's not a good situation at all, and it puts the City Council in poor light that we have a council that has got a CC management in it, involved with the community and Ngāi Tahu, and we haven't got a good community water supply. Same with Wainui wastewater supply. It's been one that's been in and out of the system over the years, and that back in 2011 that proposal was identified being in the long-term plan. Today it's not included in it at all. It is for a very small community, but it's vital that we get the water out of the harbour, Akaraa Harbour, and onto land. So what's the use of taking the Akaraa wastewater out of the harbour if we're going to have it going in on the Wainui side? So we need to look at how we can do that. And in our submission there we give perhaps an idea of an example of what we might do to resolve that. For regional facilities, a lot of the facilities, or a lot of the things that we've got on Banks Peninsula, you could consider them regional facilities, like the Diamond Harbour Wharf, the Akaraa Harbour Wharf. The Cairns Bay water scheme is you could consider that a regional facility as well. So Naval Point, and that's a bit confused in the document. It talks about Littleton Marina and Environment's development be included as presented in the draft, but it's Naval Point. And Naval Point is very important for our water activities, whether it's swimming, board surfing, whatever it might be, that it's important that we have a facility there. And there is some funding that is already being identified from the community that they would be quite happy to form partnership and look at building to house Naval Point and also the Coast Guard. So there are a lot of opportunities down there for working together as a team. Now, what we want from the long-term plan are connected communities and empowered citizens, and I think that we, over the years, have got those. As you can see up there, we've got the Cairns Bay Camping Ground, we've got the Devotional Hall in the middle, we've got the Little Akaloa Hall, we've got Little River and the Big Ideas, and we've got the Diamond Harbour Plan. So we have worked with many of our communities over the years. The three at the bottom will be run by reserve committees, and then the two at the top are village planning and residents and ratepayers, local residents behind them. So for our local facilities, those were those little things that we included back there, like the Devotionals Hall and the Little Akaloa, and there are many others. Allendale's got a new one, Governor's Bay's got a new one, but for many of them, they're very old, not decrepit or due for to be demolished. They are focuses of our community. For example, the Pigeon Bay Hall. So a little bit of money would help to improve those facilities and continue to keep those groups working in behind him. The next one is we talk about is the Banks Peninsula toilet block renewals. What a subject. Anyway, the funding has been identified for a number of toilet blocks across the peninsula. So we're looking at asking the council, could we put the lump sum together for those toilet blocks on the peninsula and look at working through with the community board and the communities to work out which ones are more important than others that we should be starting with or doing the work on. So if we go to community planning, we've had two planning processes over recent years, the Little River Big Ideas and the Diamond Harbour Village Plan. Both of those have got a plan at very little cost. $15,000 was allocated to them, and I don't think either of them used their full funding amount. So it would be nice now to look at allowing them to have some funding to do some of those projects, and there are many of them, and you'll hear from the Little River Rairera Trust who's looking at pushing those forward. And of course our submission also talks about some of those things. So coastal inundation is one where we look at needs to come forward. We need to be thinking about it now. In fact, tomorrow we've got a power cut in Pigeon Bay where Orion are actually putting risers on our power poles because they're in the sea now, that the sea walls have disappeared. So it is in front of our eyes, and we need to start with working with our Banks Peninsula communities to look at how we're going to deal with it. And they're quite major issues. So maximising our investment. It's about empowerment through partnerships, and those are all the plans that we've got. There are a whole host of them that we've got here. The Littleton Port Plan, Recovery Plan, the Iwi Management Plan, Whakahora, the Littleton Master Plan. There's a huge number of them, and there's others as well as those there. But it is about empowering through partnership, and that's how we, in Banks Peninsula, well, how the whole city needs to be looking at how can we get the best out of our communities at the least cost. And a little bit of money goes a long way. So they're just finally here, the next one, where does the money come from? It's about board empowerment. It may be that we're looking at prioritising the funding that's allocated to some of those Banks Peninsula projects, and we look clearly look at where they might go. Maybe we look at the cemeteries funding and decide where it might best be spent. But we thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you today. And on the final slide, we've got our vision and our way of working, which comes from our board plan. I just wanted to make one final little comment about the rating and the rates proposal for the Akaroa Health Hub. And the difficulty for our community, we're looking at raising over $3 million for our integrated health centre, and that this looked as though it might have been a way that we could actually support our community, just the Akaroa community, to get some extra funding to support them to assist with that process. I look at the development that you have available for improvement in a business district, improvement. Why can't that sort of be looked at for the similar sort of situation for helping a community? Our hospital and health facilities are public facilities, they're not private. So can I just tag that little one at the end? It's raise the profile of it.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you raised that one at the end, because that was the one that I wanted to ask about. You know, it did occur to me, I went out to a meeting with one of the councillors, Dion Swiggs, with the Sydenham business community, and they kind of, the business improvement district model, which has been established in our planning processes, they weren't really aware of it and didn't really see that it was a possibility, and were quite interested in it. So I think that raising it now, as you have, it is good. I have to say the weight of submissions don't seem to support the idea, but I think that's because they haven't had a real example such as yours. And so maybe what we need to do is, in order to facilitate your community that wants to be considered in this way, is whether we can find a mechanism for expanding a business improvement district model into a more community-oriented model. But it does present us with a challenge, because you've got a real example, a real live example where the community's on board, and I think that it's been quite challenging for people to think, well, we don't want another rate, but they don't see it, that it's actually a fundraising mechanism for something that people want, and that they have to vote for it in order to go down that track. But it has been a bit of a wake-up call about how important that is. So I'm just kind of reinforcing that. But anyway, I've got Sarah and then Vicky.
Hi Pam, thanks so much for that. Really good to see it. I was just wondering, while the budget for everywhere is very tight with everything,
yes.
You've got some key priorities that have been around for a while, such as the Akaroa Wharf and Diamond Harbour, those kind of things. And you've also got the Naval Point. I'm just wondering if it would be useful to have the ability to be able to prioritise within those, if funding wasn't available to add more, then whether it would be useful for you as a board to be able to prioritise funding within those at all.
I think that would be very difficult for us to do that, because they're there for different reasons.
I know.
Naval Point is for recreation, Diamond Harbour is for a transport network, Akaroa is for cruise ships, economics, visitors. It's very difficult. So I think that, I think that we would accept that perhaps a little bit of seeding funding to start the processes, to get them moving along, get the working groups going, to look at how they're going to do it, what's going to be involved, like we have with Naval Point, and then we need to know that it's going to be included in the long-term plan as soon as possible.
But so Naval Point's got a big chunk now.
Yes,
so it's got some. It had some seed initially. Now it's got a bit of a chunk.
Yes, yes.
Would maybe taking some of that chunk to do seed funding for the other ones to look at how they would be developed, just a little bit.
No, I can't.
If there's no other funding available.
Yeah. These are regional facilities. I would claim that these are other regional facilities, and that perhaps some of the budgets in town need to be looked at so that we can actually complete these facilities for the region. They are for the region. They're not for Banks Peninsula totally. They are mainly for the region.
Okay, thank you.
And a lot of them are health and safety issues.
Yep. Yeah,
condition.
The safety stuff is really, really important.
Yes,
That's why I was
yes.
sort of some of the other, It's one of those, if there's not extra funding available, then would you like the opportunity to choose?
I don't know. We haven't considered that as a board, whether we can choose.
Vicky.
Thank you for the submission. I noticed in the Fendleton Waimaori one this morning, or Fendleton, whatever you are now, one this morning, that they allocated they did a big graph that they put up there on the contributions versus the proposed capital expenditure by ward. Banks Peninsula was interesting in that the capital expenditure is about, on this graph, about 13 to 14%, and the rates contribution about 2.5%.
Right.
So there is a major contribution from the rest of the city ratepayers. What I'm intrigued by then is your response to the fuel tax, and I understand the logic behind it, but given how much other ratepayers are contributing here, what's your alternative suggested spreading of the rates burden, given how high it will become?
Well, I think you've got to look at Banks Peninsula. What is Banks Peninsula? It is the backdrop to the city.
No, I got the garden analogy and all of that.
Yeah, it's regional issues that we're doing, and I think it's very unfair to look at those ratepayers are there paying for all of those things that are there in our community.
There was a question in the thing about alternative forms of revenue raising.
Yes.
and you didn't like the fuel tax, so I would have expected that you would have looked at something else, something different.
We haven't had the time to look at anything else that's different, Vicky. I think that's quite an unfair question of expecting. It was a very short time frame that was around that. We're not economists. I think it's a bit unreasonable to expect us as a community to come up as alternative. Perhaps we might put a road tax at the beginning of Banks Peninsula and collect from all of those that come and visit us. I don't know. It's difficult. And the very people that you'll take that extra road tax are us that can travel long distances to your meetings to do things in town. And yet our roads are in poor condition. So we need to look at it equitably. Yeah, we do need to look at equitably and fairly.
It is very challenging. I mean,
Yes.
the truth is that, you know, and I've said it before, the shotgun wedding between Christchurch City and Banks Peninsula was always going to play out this way. So we have to find a way that we can work together in order to achieve what needs to be achieved. There's enormous challenges facing us, particularly with Akaroa wastewater, the other things that you've highlighted. So we're going to have to, it is going to be a question of working together to find solutions. And maybe
that we start now. We don't leave it until just a few months before we do look at the next.
I totally agree.
Start right now, working together, thinking how we can do it.
I've read the submissions for tomorrow, and I know a number of people are going to say that we can actually do this whole process of LTPs a lot better,
Yes.
and I agree. And I think that Raf said this before, so I'm just going to steal his idea but attribute, and that is that if we actually just think of this as an iterative process every year,
Yeah.
I mean, you can change an LTP every year, just whether you have to go through a special consultative procedure or not in a consultation document depends on the significance of the changes that you're making. So why not take this as a much more iterative process over the 3-year term and then engage the community in the consultation documents themselves. So leave it, I mean, I'm not saying leave it with us, but work with us over how we could do this better over the long term.
It's our communities that need to work with us too.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yanni?
Thank you for your submission, and I do want to acknowledge that the Peninsula community has been very good at looking at how to work with us jointly, and has got, I guess, because of the history, a way of doing things which seem a lot less than what we would do. And with that being said, I was really interested in the naval point, because it seems a huge amount of money, given all the concerns that you've raised and all the other things that you'd like funded. Have you thought about how much of that would just be essential to get something there that would be, you know, it's still an upgrade, but at a much greater reduction of cost, so that we could fund some of the other things that you're asking for?
Well, there are some things that the Naval Point team have been looking at, that, you know, putting in something that might be temporary, but as we know, temporary often becomes permanent. And the thoughts, so there have been some thoughts with groups that you're far better to put a more substantial bit in to start off with to get it moving, rather than putting something in. For example, taking the pontoons that are out there now in Littleton that you could pick up and use, but they're in a poor condition. They're the best of the poor, but you know, the advice is that we need to use it we need to put something that's in and fits in with the plan that's going to move ahead. But certainly, maybe that is an option, that we actually look at it. What can we start doing? It's vital.
I'd be really interested, given the number of things that you've asked us to look at funding for, if you could look at the Naval Point projects and work out which was really the most important. And also, you mentioned that was seen as a regional facility,
yes.
And yet the community board's got the delegation over it.
Yes.
So are you happy to give up delegation if it's a regional metropolitan facility?
Well, I don't know that we'd give it up, would we? We would be part of it, wouldn't we? I'm not sure.
Right, can I just take Aaron, because we're right on the deadline for time.
Oh, yeah, mine was just a quick point, and I loved your photos at the start. You're certainly competing with the eastern suburbs for the best photos of the city, the best looking part. And the analogy around the garden versus the living room and stuff, I think it's better a family analogy. And I look at Banks Peninsula more like a Maryvale wife. that they look really good but very expensive.
I love it. So just
I'm actually going to strongly object to that comment, and I'm actually going to rule it out of order. I mean, I know what you're trying to say, and it just really was a very bad way to try and say it. So just that's fine for Friday night. I don't have to go.
Leanne, can I just say in closing, can I thank our board team that gives us a hand to do this. We've got some amazing skills within our staff to allow us to put these presentations together. We have spent many hours, many hours over the last few months getting things together, understanding what the issues are, and they're really deserving of wonderful accolades. Yes.
Thank you very much, and very well deserved. Thank you. Right, if we could have Sally Buck and the team for Linwood Central Heathcote.
I apologise for my comment. I was meant to say Ponsonby.
He's coming. He shot out. He shot out.
It was a joke about a TV show. I retract. I'll stop watching TV.
Oh.
We've got them all.
It's like herding cats, isn't it?
Are you right? Are we on?
Yep.
Okay.
Pretty far away.
Okay, thanks. We, the Waikura Community Board, would like to thank the Council for allowing us to speak to our submission. With me today, I've got Tim Lindley, Daryl Latham and Jake McLellan here. We've got the whole board here except for one person. And they will speak on parts of our submission as well. I would just firstly like to speak on the proposed capital program item, the Linwood Woolston Pool. Our board covers a huge area. It covers the suburbs of Addington, Avonside, Bromley, Phillipstown, Central City, Sydenham, Woolston, Waltham, Linwood, Heathcote, Perrymead, Mount Pleasant, Redcliffe, Sumner and parts of St Albans. Now, we as a board are a very diverse group of people from across these various suburbs. However, we are totally united about the need for an aquatic community facility in the Linwood Woolston area to serve all these suburbs, especially the lower socioeconomic suburbs in our area. We're united about the need for this, we're united about where it should go, and we're united about the type of facility that is proposed. And our communities in these areas are united and right behind us on this issue. We do not support any reduction in funding or extending the timeline for this community facility. And our board really appreciates the Council's resolution to delegate the decision of the location, scope and final concept design to the board. I just want to say, in our submission, we have included some projects that could be deferred or cancelled to help with your budgeting process. We also support alternate ways of the Council raising money. Now I'm going to pass to Jake to talk about some of the things he wants to talk about.
Sure. I'm just going to briefly touch on inner city priorities. So the regeneration of the Linwood Village is something this board is determined to see real progress happen in the current term. The community-led revitalisation plan is well underway and will be completed by December 2018. We're getting lots of feedback and are being kept well abreast of learnings. So early community feedback indicates that more community facilities and green spaces are a priority, and the board requests funding to implement the plan's all-important priority projects. In that same vein, we're calling for a greening of the inner city east. That's a high priority for the ward area I represent. The board requests funding for this to enhance the aesthetic and the health outcomes of the neighbourhood and contribute to Christchurch's image as a garden city. This needs to be a part of the city residents are even more proud to belong to. Money has been assigned, but now we're keen to see some project progress. The board would also like to commend Council's Housing First initiative. However, we continue to advocate for more and higher quality social housing. Daryl, I think.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. 3 issues that I'd like to address. The first is drinking water, stormwater and flood protection infrastructure. Drinking water, stormwater and flood protection are significant priorities for the city, and the board fully supports the council initiatives in these areas. The board also notes the planning around coastal hazards and signals the need for funding in the widest sense to implement priority actions in the future. Secondly, the master plans inclusive of the Ferry Road Master Plan, Woolston Village upgrade and Heathcote and Oak Street streetcapes enhancements and the suburban master plan programs overall. Council will be aware that there are 9 master plans within the Linwood Central Heathcote board area. We have 5 of those master plans, so it is a significant issue for us. So the board supports the completion of all suburban master plans in the board area, inclusive of Buchan Park remodel. The suburban master planning process has helped achieve a restoration of a vision for suburban Christchurch. It has been a process of rebuilding people's confidence, expectation and optimism in their communities and the wider city. So therefore we support the council's initiatives in the master planning areas. Finally, the skate facility, Sumner to Ferrymead and the Village Green. This is a priority project of significance in the Bays area. For our board. A skate facility for youth will have multiple benefits. It has been a project that has seen significant community engagement over an extended period of time, and the time is now right to bring this process to fruition. Therefore, the board supports this project as it has been a long-standing community project. Thank you. Tim.
Right, I'm going to talk on 4 of our priorities. The first one's major cycleways. Now, the cycleways projects overall in the city have reached an interesting stage where enough has been done to get numbers on how many people will be using them. And the figures that are coming through show that the cycleways are popular and will be used even more than anticipated. So we strongly encourage completion of the cycleways in our area, the Heathcote Expressway and the Rapanui cycleway, without any further delays. So we support strongly the funding of those cycleways. We also note that the Rapanui cycleway will connect the centre of the city through to the beginning of the Christchurch Coastal Pathway at Ferrymead. And that leads me on to the second one, which is the coastal pathway itself. The work's currently underway on the pathway that will be carried out in the next year or so. Will bring the pathway to the position where 90% of the length of the route will be in place. The bit that's missing is that will be the chunk around the difficult section around Marks Bay. And as a board we request that the project is taken to full completion. It has so many benefits in terms of health, protecting against climate change outcomes, providing safe transit between suburbs. The connection between Redcliffs and Sumner is a very difficult section and is a dangerous one for pedestrians and cyclists. So we strongly urge that is completed. I want to mention at the beginning of the coastal pathway there's that lovely little building called Cobb Cottage, which is much loved but is sitting under plastic and quietly, who knows what's happening to it under there. We strongly support repair of Cobb Cottage as soon as possible. It's one that's much loved in the community. There's strong support for it to be brought out from wraps and into a place where people can enjoy it. And finally, I want to talk about the flood protection works, particularly along the Heathcote and Apawaho River. The residents along there that are on our boards and other boards have been very patient while the council does the detailed work of mapping out exactly how things have changed and exactly what the impact of various remedying activities will have. It is now time for those to be implemented and implemented as quickly as possible. So we strongly support the flood protection work along the Heathcote. We also note that it gives a great deal of opportunities for community enhancement, walkways, cycleways, etc., in a relatively inexpensive way along a beautiful part of it. So we encourage community consultation with enhancement work as that happens. So there's a strong desire for that to happen for a safety perspective, but it would also add so much to the community. And that's my list.
Thank you. I just had one more thing to say. Last year we advocated for a drop-in centre, a citywide project for a drop-in centre for street communities, and we were left after the annual plan with the idea that council was going to work with us on this and have it somewhere near central city, and we put forward a site for it, a council piece of land for it. But we're still waiting to find out where this is going and, you know, how we can help progress this idea further. We have left plenty of time for questions.
Right, good. Well, I've got Jamie, Glenn, Phil, Mike.
Great, thank you. You speak of the inner city east revitalisation, particularly around the Linwood Village area, but I wondered if your board had a view on central city residential, specifically within the 4 Avs. And I guess to put that differently, I note the dog park request, but does the board wish to see more residents living centrally? And is there a role for the council to do more or help incentivise expediting that?
Jake, do you want to say anything, or do you want me to say something?
Well, the board doesn't have a...
We haven't taken a board position on it. I do think that what you have in place, which the government I know put in place in terms of what you've got to do in central city, I think it limits what people can do in there and is causing a lot of problems now, as we have an issue coming up on our board later today about how places are being able to be built without any parking, and so therefore other streets are having to take the brunt of that, you know, and they're wanting walkways through parks so that they can get to their place through the back, and then the other streets have all the parking for that. If you look at our board agenda, you'll see that on it today. We have that issue. So I think, if anything, the council could have a look at what the government did with Central City and maybe have a rethink about how it's actually working out, in actual fact.
Perfect.
Yeah, it's the district plan issue, but I was just quite surprised that you hadn't taken a position on the numbers of people.
Only like one sort of people to live in there.
Sorry?
It allows only a sort of like, it doesn't allow anybody to, you know, it's not said, well, actually, here's a space of land we could have tiny houses in. Here's some land where people could build some bigger houses or something, rather than having to have a unit every 200 square metres. So it doesn't allow for any variety in there.
Yeah, well, that is an interpretation of it, but I hope you've got someone from the resource consenting area or the district plan people coming to talk to your community, because I mean there's not a requirement, it's not a restriction. You can't not have parking. You're not obliged not to have parking, but it's not a requirement to have parking. But anyway, that's.
But then if you've got 400 square metres in the central city area, and you try and put one house on that, it's very difficult to get that through council.
Yeah.
They want you to put more.
There is a requirement to build more densely than you would in the neighbourhoods. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, even if you've only had one house on there, it's very difficult to put one back.
Yeah.
If I could add to what Sally is saying and say that this is not necessarily a board perspective, it's a personal perspective, but I do have a concern over the way the development is taking place within the central city, particularly with the parking issues and the accessibility issues, and I think that is something that council needs to reflect on, because the feedback that I'm getting even within our board is that is an area of concern.
Yeah, the district plan is the district plan though, so
Yes,
I mean
yes, I understand
the LTP process is not something that we can utilise, but the desire to have more people living in the CBD was a lot sooner than the earthquakes ever occurred. You know, it's been in the urban development strategy for a very long time. And I'm just surprised that the community board doesn't have a view on it.
20,000 by 2024.
No, 2041 was the urban development strategy, and all the there's been no change to the urban development strategy that brings that forward at this stage. But that is what we're working on. Glenn, Phil.
Thank you. Page 92, you say request additional funding for new social housing units. Can you please tell us what precisely would be that funding source? And it's in the context of... Well, is it in the context of talking about council housing?
Yes, and I can't remember how that one got on. It wasn't one of our major priorities, and sometimes the LTP submissions coming into our board. Things like that.
Okay, so, well it's written and it's also on the PowerPoint presentation.
We did, and I mean, I think social housing is great, and the more we can have of it, the better. But
it's just a bit of a general statement. It's not up to us to decide how your capitalisation of your housing trust happens or anything like that. What we are saying is we support social housing and we support more of it.
You're requesting additional funding, it's in your submission, but you're not saying where it's from. Okay.
I've just said that's not our...
We have given you some projects where we would say you could defer these or cancel some of them even if you wish to save some money.
Okay.
No on our submission.
Phil?
Thank you. You've commended the Housing First program and also referred to developing our social housing, increasing that. So, I just want to ask you about where the drop-in centre concept might fit in with that, especially, for example, Housing First for people who are homeless, how that might be aligned and fit together, perhaps. And I also wonder if you've talked to the City Mission, perhaps, about the drop-in centre.
I don't think it aligns as such, and we hadn't tried to align it together. And like I said here, that we brought this idea of drop-in centre to you because we felt it was really needed in the annual plan, and we were told it will go to committees, which I think you were one of your committees, maybe you, Phil, your committee, and I can't remember who else's committee, and that the council would work with us as a board. However, we have not heard anything back from anybody about this, and that's why I'm raising it here.
I think we could talk further, and also with the City Mission as well, Sally.
It would be good, because I thought you were going to be leading that thing, and because it was a citywide project rather than just a board project, and the homeless don't just live in our area, they live in all areas of Christchurch, but where they congregate is often in our area.
Mike?
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd just like to acknowledge, obviously, the board's support for obviously the Linwood Pool, which is a much needed aquatic facility in your area, and also your ongoing support of community facilities. And the fact that you mentioned St Albans is a part of your community board area. It's actually a significant part as well. There is a lot of residents in there. And it's only 100 metres away from the St Albans Community Centre that's going to be rebuilt, and also around 300 metres away from the St Albans pool, community pool, that the community are actually saying, we want this back. So as a community board, would you support these community projects getting the additional funding required?
You mean
St Albans Pool, Edgware Pool, and the St Albans Community Centre, which pretty much is right on the boundary of Central and actually affects a lot of the residents that you advocate for. Would you support funding for those two projects?
Well, we haven't made any decision on that as a board, so I don't like to speak as for the board. And I'm wondering if you've asked every board this question.
No, I'm asking this board.
He's asking the boundary question.
The boundary, because
it was bound to be asked.
Yeah, St Albans Community Centre is 100 metres from the central ward, so a lot of the users of that centre are going to be from Central. And also the same with Edgware Pool, it's 300 metres from the boundary, so a lot of the users of the pool are going to be actually from Central. And we've heard very clearly from the community about how important these two projects are. So you may not have a board view, but does anyone have a personal view on whether...
No, that's not fair. They're here as a board, and I think that you've cleverly raised the issue, and I'm sure that they will take it back to their community board for further consideration before they come.
I think the issue here is not raising the question and putting it in front of us cold, but give us the information and let us make a decision rather than putting us on the spot to answer something that we don't have all the facts on. Yeah, I think that's absolutely the right answer, and it does give us an opportunity to think around those, because I mean some of the wards we've already heard, that things transferred from one ward to another, and then change community boards, and so people who've very familiar with a particular subject suddenly are faced with it being dealt with in another ward. So anyway, that gives us an opportunity to...
Yeah, I think I could say on behalf of the board, though, that we would in no way back down from our very strong support for the Linwood Aquatic Centre in the way that is envisaged by the board.
Yeah. Exactly, and making decisions at this
anyway,
council level is an informed process.
And the advantage of raising the Edgware one is the incredible cost saving that it would represent if it were modelled on the other side of the ward. So, just saying. Thank you very, very much for coming forward today and for putting so much effort into your presentation. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Carolyn Potter and the Spraydon Cashmere Community Board representatives. Thank you. No problem.
Kia ora tātou. We represent the Te Hora Spraydon Cashmere Community Board. Is that okay? Waihora. I said Te Hora. Waihora Spraydon Cashmere Community Board. On my left is Araha Nui Grace and Melanie Coker and Helene Mountner. I want to start this off by just naming, and I know this sounds boring and self-aggrandising, I want to name the Residents Association and other committed groups in our community. The City Council used to acknowledge Residents Association in the old days with a prize for the Residents Association of the Year. Vicky Buck, in her role as mayor, gave me one once. The Beckenham Residents Association won it. She slightly spoiled the occasion by then commenting that Beckenham was a suburb of Sydenham, and why didn't we call ourselves that? Oh, I forget what it was, but it was meant to be a great honour. We shook the hand. Craycroft Residents Association, the Huntsbury Community Centre, Hoonhay Community Association, Spraydon Neighbourhood Network, Addington Neighbourhood Association, the Lower Cashmere Residents Association, Summerfield Residents Association, the Cashmere Residents Association, Manuka Cottage, Addington Net, Rowley House, Apawaho Heskett River Network, Beckenham Neighbourhood Association, the Hoonhay Community Centre and Hoonhay Community Association, Whariora House, our schools, many of whom the board visited in the last year, our churches. Some of the people from our churches sustain the residents' associations, our environmental groups, including the River Network, Friends of Ernley Clark, the Friends of the Cashmere Stream, and New World, St Martin's, Barrington Mall, Zero's Cafe and Hillmorton High, who hosted us when we consulted the community about the LTP. The Spraydon appreciates the opportunity to submit on the plan, and we are speaking to it. The board is mindful of the concerns expressed by, this is the first time we've ever raised this, the board is mindful of the concerns expressed by residents about rate increases, particularly many of those on fixed incomes, and we have the largest percentage of our population are older people in the Spraydon Cashmere ward, are experiencing difficulty with meeting the increasing demands on their financial resources, and that includes people with debilitating illness and disability, and single parents. The board understands the financial constraints the council is under, and we do, and the efforts it continues to make to curb rate rises. This submission is made with those financial considerations in mind. We are also very conscious that, for instance, we have enormous sums of money being spent on flooding in particular and other infrastructure issues that go with having the Opawa Heathcote River throughout our ward, and including house purchases. And we also know that we have pockets of flooding that continue to distress residents in our ward. There is no time when we're not having heavy rain where I don't think of those people who have had constant flooding, not just in their houses but through their garages or on their property, and how they lie awake at night listening to the water fall. Do you want to read the general maintenance?
Yep.
Yep.
So about general maintenance, which normally we don't bring up either, but the board has been hearing from residents, like all other boards in the area in Christchurch, about the standard of the maintenance by council, including the footpaths and of course potholes and roads, parks and reserves and other green space, and how it's being maintained, and also the use and maintenance of drainage facilities. One other comment we've got here, because I actually went to a talk that was given about the use of herbicides, and there's been, we've made a comment here about the council possibly revisiting sort of the information that you've looked at before around the not using glyphosate to control weeds. So apparently there's new scientific evidence that says actually it's not toxic to people. And there's been it's been collated from a whole lot of scientific evidence, and I've got a whole email of about 10 or 12 links that you could read if you're interested. So it's something that we're wondering if you could look at, because it's a cheaper and more effective method if it isn't toxic to people. And then the other next one is around water, and we always say this about believing in pure, clean and clear water in all forms, and particularly around the Opawa Heathcote River, and we consider the river to be our taonga, and we're always looking for funding provision for the protection and maintenance and enhancement of the Opawa Heathcote River and its water quality, which of course Calvin's kind of mentioned already.
Community funding. The board stresses the importance of council's funding of the many community groups and projects that are at the heart of the city. The board would oppose any reduction of the level of community funding and agree with Papanui Innes's submission in this respect. The hundreds of dollars and the very few thousands of dollars that we contribute to some organisations are disproportionately important to those groups and are disproportionately valuable to the community that those groups serve. And we beg the council to maintain the level of community funding and keep it in line with inflation. Safe routes to school. This is not one of the sexy subjects, and it's not one of the subjects that has a high priority in terms of subjects that people talk about when they think about the council, but it is nonetheless a service to the community in terms of the community travel advisors and the traffic engineers that the community really values, especially the schools. We have had lots of comments, particularly in the last year, from schools and staff involved with the Major Cycle Routes program and the council staff concerned with the safety of local roads and exits in and out of schools, about how much they value the services provided by the council in this respect. Most recently, Tim and I went to, at his instigation, went and looked at the St Martin's roundabout, which we have not put in the long-term plan, but if the Mayor's idea of the long-term plan being a rolling reiteration, then we would be thinking about submitting on the St Martin's roundabout perhaps in the next year. In the meantime, the resourceful traffic engineers have implemented a light indicating at your speed as you approach the roundabout in order to try and keep people safer who are circumnavigating that very busy area around St Martin's School. Heritage buildings. The board that understands there is not sufficient funding to repair all local heritage buildings within the first few years of the long-term plan. A process has been developed to assess interest in the various heritage buildings. The board is of the view that repair of all heritage buildings must eventually be a priority for the city, given those that have gone forever. The board has nevertheless indicated below at 3.6 and 4.1 where it considers some delay may be sustainable and where it considers no delay to repair would be acceptable. We have one priority in our board, and that's Coronation Hall. We think the delay in the consideration on this building has been unfortunate, and we would like to see this building and its use addressed very quickly even in the next 6 months. We are always opposed to the sale of council assets as a financial strategy. Disability access. This board has raised disability access possibly 6 years in a row. The board recognises the importance of disability access being met, and to this end has previously sought a specific requirement in all projects and proposals that come to the council, committees and community boards to include a requirement for staff comment as to how the proposal or project will affect accessibility for people with disability. I do not understand why the council cannot implement this. Disability isn't at the forefront of anybody who is able-bodied's mind when they present proposals and projects to the board, nor is it in the forefront of fit and active people who are assessing those projects. Disability only becomes important to those who are disabled. It is one of the most discriminated against groups. I cannot understand why council processes do not allow for consideration on the impact of proposals on people with disability, especially in the ordinary idea, for instance, of getting in and out of your car when faced with deep ditch gutters. Just for example. Flooding issues. As I have already said, we understand the enormity of the flooding issues experienced in the wake of the newspapers, and we appreciate the continuing work in that area by the superb engineers that are involved with all our waters. We support very much the proposals for the banks of the Heskett River and for the Curlitz storage basin, and I have spoken to neighbours of the Curlitz proposal, and they are delighted at the idea of having a reserve that will enhance the safety and condition of the water, but also present them with a reserve next door to their land between them and Curlitz Road. The thing that gets you a little bit though are the people listening to that water that I talked to you about, and we have frequently met with exhausted residents whose houses are being flooded in small pockets of flooding in our ward. Manuka Cottage. Manuka Cottage has been operating in Addington since the 1990s. It's a very successful community centre. It is now in St Mary's Church. I can remember the despair I felt in 2014 when the council told Manuka Cottage that their cottage would not be rebuilt before 2016. It is delightful to know that we are very close to this putting the spade in the turf for the turning of the first sod, and we would stress that we need continual provision of funding for the premises of this community development project that has been critical both to the support of the local community and a positive and productive civic engagement over the recent years. Our priority projects. Do you want to read that? Have a go there.
Oh, so our first priority is, as usual, the Mid-Heathcote Linear Master Plan. So we're advocating now for the implementation of the master plan. It was developed with lots of consultation quite a long time ago now. I think it was like about 10 years ago. And aspects of the plan are now being given effect as the river banks are being stabilised near the South Library and other parts as well. And that's currently underway. But we believe that now is the right time for that work to be undertaken and for provision of this funding to be advanced into the long-term plan.
Barrington Mall, this is the fourth year that the Barrington Mall has been our priority. Last year it was operational funding with the promise that it would be done last year. The difficulties have arisen, as is natural. You can't get in and out of Barrington Mall as a pedestrian. You can't get in and out of Barrington Mall without mixing it with all kinds of traffic. And it's extremely dangerous, and it has the Spraden Library right next door to exacerbate the problem. The project was the board's top priority in 17-18 annual plan. Residents going to the mall and the adjacent park are very familiar with the near incidents and accidents. The traffic engineers have put up a camera to note the difficulties of the exits and entrances to this mall. We want the right-hand turn abolished. It's a very simple procedure if you're a person looking outside. Apparently, if you're a traffic engineer, it's not. But we would hope that this will be funded and going this year. The intersection of Barrington Street, Lincoln Road and Whiteley Ave, there is a significant community of disabled persons residing in proximity to the intersection. The provision in the draft long-term for safety plans does not include fully compliant for disability, accessibility and safety. We would seek this intersection in particular because of the numbers of people that live absolutely adjacent to this intersection, who are seriously disabled and living in supported living circumstances, that this intersection of all the intersections set the standard for being fully compliant for disability, accessibility and safety. We have a community centre in Hoonhay that was the children's library. It's tiny and perfect. It is a lovely cottage. It is much enjoyed by the neighbourhood. We have sung carols outside of it and we've eaten the barbecues outside of it. We've had meetings inside of it, including a recent flooding one of about more than 30 people, which to our surprise were very comfortably housed. We cannot practice manaakitanga in this little community centre, which just incidentally the saving of which was led by Melanie Coker. We cannot practice manaakitanga in there because it's got no kitchen. We want a few $1,000s to put in a kitchen and a disabled loo, and this little place will be perfect for the Hoonhay community, which has not had a community centre before. The intersection of Cashmere, Hoonhay, Worsleys Road has been postponed. This is a dangerous intersection. It's one of those intersections that our neighbours of Hornby, Horsfall, Riccarton talked about in terms of, it's one of the intersections along Cashmere Road that our neighbours talked about, and this intersection particularly needs addressing right now. And our neighbour talked about the intersection coming off the hills of Westmoreland. Thank God for your memory. If we can have a proper intersection here with lights, that will pulse the traffic and will probably help even Westmoreland that far away. Coronation Hall, this is the one subject that we talked about. Sustained fire damage in October 2015. The Kiruru Club that was occupying it have gone to other premises. We have had expressions of interest from groups including a drama a drama group with a long-standing, credible reputation in the wider Christchurch community, and with a toy library and other people who have expressed interest in it. We are despair about the delay and consideration. We look forward to some funding. We know there's funding, we know there's funding in the long-term plan now. We didn't know there was funding in the long-term plan because it's not apparent. It's over 500,000 and it's in OPEX somehow, and you won't be seeing it, but we only found out about it when we were briefed at long last on it. And so there is money there that's been allocated for its repair, and there are groups that are waiting. We want it earlier. Yeah, we want it earlier. We want it earlier. We haven't asked for much, and this is one of the things we have asked for. We would like to delay or delete repair of the Craycroft cabins. I'd love to go in there and have a look. I'd love you guys to go in there and have a look. There'll be people here who've been in there to have a look, but it can be fenced off and delayed, and the repair can wait for us to win Lotto. I'd like to thank Hornby, Hallsville and Riccarton for their contribution to the discussion on Lincoln Road, Curlitz to Wrights. Unfortunately, their residents didn't elect them because they don't cover that area. We do. And our position is not that Lincoln Road should be widened. We think we can save $8 million. There are 4 lanes at the lights of Curlitz and Wrights, 1 going left, 1 going right, and 2 going ahead. And we can install a bus priority lane in one of the 2 going ahead without widening this road 1 metre. Not 1 metre. And if we care about public transport, we can support that. And if we think widening roads to allow more cars means anything else but build it and they will come, we are idiots. We can save ourselves $8 million. We can save Hallsville, Hornby, Riccarton from having to worry about a section of the road that isn't part of their ward. And we can get exactly what needs to be done in terms of bus priority without widening that road a single metre, and we can save $8 million.
And heritage as well.
And heritage as well. Thank you. Any comments? Do you want to say anything? You want to say anything?
We've got a minute for questions.
Okay.
Dion.
I actually just wanted to say thank you for actually bringing us something that has a saving. I've just been counting in my head, we're up to about $50 million of extra capital from just this morning, which is 1% of rates, but minus 8 million is 42 million, so thanks. I think, yeah, it's a good example of, you know, the focus of a lot of what we do, especially I think, and even the community boards, is on the capital stuff. But you even mentioned it, they've got something in OPEX that we're not all seeing. So, you know, I think there's a better exercise where we could actually look at OPEX as well as the CAPEX, because that's what's really going to drive some of the savings in the council. And you identified it beautifully, and also the first community board as well. So thank you. I just wanted to make that comment because it's unsustainable.
That's right. And
to do it like this.
When we were
Dwayne,
I'm going mad today.
Sorry, you hit him.
Can you please withdraw and apologise? Withdraw and apologise, please.
You never withdrew and apologised when I was disabled. Dion, just to say that when we were visiting the Sydenham Business Association, they were very, very familiar with the bid.
Yeah, no,
and
they
were
are.
They were talking to the university about it.
They've got a new committee, so they've gone through quite a major restructure.
I wondered if that was the story. Yep.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for the reminder again around the importance to flag the disability issues in our papers. So I'll discuss that with the Chief Executive, but there are a few things around the decision-making papers that come to council that could be improved, and I think one of the elements is actually the requirement for any disability issues to be tagged in the actual report. And then if it's a tag in the report, then somebody's going to have to check to see if there are any disability-related issues. So it serves as a reminder where it's not required, and it serves as an action point where it is. So thank you very much for trying again. Hopefully this time we'll get a result. Look, thank you very much. I'm now going to adjourn the meeting until 9:30 tomorrow morning. So thank you all very much for participating today. I think it was a very good start.